Chapter 988. Looming Hall. He didn't see anyone at all. Nato, who was smoking a pipe, heard his subordinate's report and raised his eyes in surprise. The subordinate nodded. Yes, it seems that he doesn't care about those things at all. Why, sure, that guy is already inflated to such an extent. After all, he's a young man. He doesn't even bother to put on a show. Very well, if the heavens want him to die, they must make him crazy. He's addicted to the expansion of power and has no eyes for anyone else. It's not far from the time when the people's hearts are lost. Nato knocked on the pipe and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he said, "Tell William and Kenita that we want to see his further results." He said, "The sooner the better." Yes. The subordinate nodded and turned to leave. In the darkness, only Nato quietly stared at the flickering flame in the pipe. The faint sparks illuminated the pair of cold eyes. The atmosphere on the street seemed to have changed. It was getting more and more impetuous. No matter how slow the residents were, they now saw more and more contradictions and conflicts on the street. Ghetto in suits, which were rarely seen in the past, appeared in the streets and alleys, and there were more and more people causing trouble. There were also many familiar faces among the unfamiliar faces. There were flyers distributed by the Alliance of Freedom everywhere. It was said that many stores were also smashed. The reason was that they looked down on the foreign mixed race, or waged discrimination, and some simply suspected that the doctor had prescribed them fake medicine. There were also more and more fights. There were also places that had started a strike. The elderly closed the door and told their children not to run around. In the middle of the night, they heard abnormal movements. The men who had just returned from the construction site would wake up and press the dusty weapons under the bed. They were worried. Many people had already reported it to the company or the group, but the higher-ups were still calm. They only ordered that everything was as usual and then strengthened the defense. It made people feel a little uncertain. It was said that the production was not very smooth. Several vehicles transporting the medicine had accidents. There were also some supply contracts that had been signed that were reneged on. It was said that the pollution was excessive and violated the Environmental Protection Act. They had to be investigated by the Environmental Association or something. Everyone could feel that the atmosphere of uneasiness was quietly spreading in Donbua. It wasn't until 4 days later that a flame rose up. Outside of Donbua, in the suburbs of Kyoto, 2 trucks collided. The explosives hidden in the cargo were detonated, destroying more than half of the warehouse. 3 people were seriously injured and 1 was killed. The remaining license plate number was from Donbua. It was Donbua again. "Okay, I got it." Huaisher nodded calmly and said to the subordinates who came to inform him, "I'll leave the aftermath to you." "Yes." The subordinate nodded and turned to leave. Only in the office, Huaisher looked down at the report on the table expressionlessly. The driver who caused the accident was an employee of Huaiji Construction. He was 41 years old, male, and was responsible for transporting materials and construction waste for the construction site. The car was bought with a loan, and there were still 41 years to repay. He had a daughter and a newborn son. It was old-fashioned and never got into a conflict with others. Even when Donbua was at its most chaotic, it did not engage in any illegal activities. Then, when he was working overtime last night, he disappeared and mysteriously appeared in Jingdu. There were even traces of forbidden drugs on his body. Spiritual theory again? Huaisher asked. "Yes, they should have a border relic that can control consciousness," Huaiji replied. "The scope of their activities and their upper echelons have been figured out. The location of the headquarters also has an idea. Too slow." Huaisher interrupted him and told him, "You should be faster." "It's my fault." The youth lowered his eyes and did not refute. "No, it's only because you're doing something that I can blame you." Huaisher shook his head and laughed self-deprecatingly. "There's nothing perfect in this world. On the contrary, I'm the one who's indecisive." Huaiji was not wrong. He had already done his best. On the contrary, he was too harsh. How could something that involved hundreds of thousands of people and the undercurrent brewing within the entire city be settled with the press of a button? There would always be loopholes in guarding against thieves for 1,000 days. He could not act rashly and alert the enemy. He had to cast a long line to catch a big fish. He had to find an opportunity to catch them all in one fell swoop and uproot all the hidden dangers. Therefore, he had to endure and wait. But everything had a price. But when he saw living people turn into death notices one by one and appear in front of him, he would sincerely realize his weakness and powerlessness. He could not get used to it, even if he did not have a responsibility for everyone. This is what I asked you to do, little 19. You don't have to feel guilty or uneasy. Huaishur said, if it were me, it might not be so smooth. You just have to do your best. He said, I'll bear all the consequences. This was the only guarantee he could make. Huaishur nodded and turned to leave. After a short silence, Huaishur heard the sound of the internal phone again. It was a notification from Yuan Yuan. The commissioner of the Yingzhou Governing Bureau came to visit. I don't think there's any need to say more. Huaishur stared at the fidgeting commissioner. I remember that my relationship with the Yingzhou branch is not so good that I can send gifts to them every day, so you can say it directly. In a short silence, the commissioner sat on the sofa uneasily, twisted his body, and said stutteringly, because of the possible terrorist attack, the Looming Hall submitted a search application to the Governing Bureau not long ago. Your reaction is quite fast. Huaishur seemed to laugh. Donbua is a special pilot city recognized by the Astronomical Society, but it's not under their control. Or do you have a different opinion on this? The commissioner's face became more and more nervous. He took out a handkerchief and wiped the sweat on his forehead, not daring to look at his eyes. This matter involves the sovereignty of Yingzhou, so it's inconvenient for the Governing Bureau to intervene. The voice of the commissioner, who was pushed out to take the blame, was already trembling. I hope that the two sides can resolve it peacefully. In other words, you're on the side of the Looming Hall? Huaishur nodded in understanding. He looked down at the notice on the table and said indifferently, Let Renee talk to me. Minister Renee has gone to London a few days ago to participate in the overall planning meeting. The commissioner lowered his head. The Yingzhou branch is just acting according to the rules. We don't have the intention to be your enemy. Rules? Whose rules? Huaishur raised his hand and waved the notice. I didn't see the seal of the central decision-making room. Or do you want to use the sword of the Yingzhou Governing Bureau to cut me, a special military officer? I'm just following orders to convey the message. I know, so I won't make things difficult for you. Huaishur said coldly, You just have to go back and tell your colleagues that I don't agree. When Renee comes back from the central decision-making room, I'll have a good talk with him. The commissioner nodded frantically, as if he had been pardoned. It was as if he had escaped from under a guillotine. He was about to cry. He immediately got up and wanted to say goodbye. But then, he heard Huaishur's voice. He was calm and curious. But before that, can you tell me? Huaishur looked down at the document on the table and asked in confusion, who passed this application? Who signed this notice? The commissioner froze on the spot. At this moment, it was as if he saw the door of hell open behind him. Endless darkness rose violently and swallowed his soul. But that was just an illusion. After a moment of trance, he was already sweating profusely. There was only Huaishur's smile there. It was so gentle. It was as if it covered the entire hell. He ended the conversation in a friendly manner, thoughtfully wrote a reply letter, and politely sent the commissioner downstairs. After congratulating him on a safe journey, he watched the car escape as if it was running for its life. Huaishur sat on the bench in the hall and calmly stared in the direction they left in, as well as the figures holding signs and shouting outside the door. At this point, the situation was completely obvious. The pressure from the Looming Hall was obvious. Through the relationship with the Yingzhou Governing Bureau, they tested the pressure on Huaishur and squeezed Donbua's living space in all directions. Business, life, and public security, from every corner, they told this annoying outsider that if he didn't know how to read the air and didn't know the consequences of not understanding the rules, they didn't even resort to force. Instead, they taught Huaishur a lesson and waited for his reply. Either he chose to compromise and join the warm embrace of the Looming Hall, or he continued to be isolated and gradually shook Donbua's foundation. Nan Nan's knife had indeed accurately hit Huaishur's sore spot. Indeed, once Donbua's foundation was shaken, Huaisher would fall into a passive position. But the premise was that he had to be shaken. He dialed the number on his phone and waited for the call to be connected. Without waiting for the other party to speak, he asked straightforwardly, "Hello, is the stinky sister there?" Bang! The sound of slapping the table came from the other end. As if he had been angry for a long time, Hooper replied irritably, "If you have something to say, say it. I'm busy." "Are you involved in this matter?" Huaisher asked. Hooper was so angry that he laughed. "Get your facts straight. Who's your biggest partner right now? I'm going to instigate those old ghosts to cooperate with you and harm the interests of Enfang? Am I crazy?" "That's true." Huaisher nodded. "It doesn't seem like there's something wrong with your brain." On the other end of the phone, Hooper closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Calm down. Calm down. I can't lower myself to the same level as this bastard." "Listen, Huaisher, I know you're very angry, and I know you want to make things difficult for people right now, but you have to understand that my blood pressure is off the charts just by being Dongxia's lackey in Yingzhou. Don't provoke me, okay?" she said. "If you're willing to leave this matter to me, I'll definitely give you a satisfactory answer. But you know, the Eastern Summer genealogy has never done a losing business." The relationship between Danbua and Taiching heavy industry was already too close. If it went any further, it would also have the hidden danger of losing its independence. "Don't worry, it's not to the extent that I can't handle it myself," Huaisher said. "You just need to give me a few names." Hoopa heard this and laughed again. "You want me to give you a list of the upper echelons of Looming Hall? There's no need for so many. If we're talking about precision attacks, a few of them will be enough. Tell me who the leaders are." Huaisher said, "I don't mind having a few more who aren't on good terms with you." Hoopa was silent for a long time and couldn't help but sigh with a headache. "What?" Huaisher laughed. "You want to say that you don't need it? Of course I won't reject the benefits that come to my door. But what's the price, Huaisher?" Hoopa said faintly, "If you don't take the money, I don't have confidence in my heart." "Then forget it. Pretend I didn't say anything." Huaisher followed the good advice. "If there's nothing else, then I'll hang up." After a short silence, a helpless voice came from the other end. "Wait a minute." Thus, Huaisher's smile became more and more cheerful. Chapter 989. Did he really say that? In the Looming Hall, Nato was already dumbfounded. He confirmed it again and again. It was still unbelievable. "He actually dares to go against the Directorate?" Nato exclaimed. "That guy, is he going to throw his biggest protection aside? It's ridiculous." Once the matter got out of hand, the relationship with the Directorate would be broken, causing him to lose the recognition of the Astronomical Association. Without the protection of the law, the Danbo would be just a piece of meat on the chopping board. That Dongxia person had finally gone crazy. Very good. It couldn't be better. Nato laughed. Soon, he raised his head and ordered again. "Now that things have come to this, the conflict between the Danbo and the Yingzhou Directorate has intensified. There's no need for an existence like the Spirit Union in the future." He said, "Send out the evil spirits and clean them all up. Do it cleanly and don't leave any clues." After pondering for a moment, he ordered again, "Send a few people to protect William. Don't let him die. Let him add fuel to the fire. Tell him that after this matter is done, I guarantee the position of the Wanderer Alliance in the Danbo Parliament. It's not impossible for him to be the speaker." "Yes." The subordinate accepted the order and left. As for Nato, he looked at the report in front of him again and couldn't help but laugh out loud. There was no need to do anything else. He just had to wait for the seeds to sprout. What could be more pleasurable than to sit and watch the enemy kill himself? 2 hours later, the old man William raised his head in shock and stared at the messenger in front of him. "Is what you said true?" "Of course." The messenger solemnly conveyed the words from the top. "Whether it's funds or international support, as long as you can open the situation, there's no problem. Don't worry, leave it to me." After confirming the balance of the account again, William smiled and promised, "It's our duty to shed the last drop of blood for our compatriots." The messenger had already left silently. As for William, he walked forward excitedly. The exciting speech was about to begin again. The old houses in the old city district were immersed in a fanatical atmosphere. In the silent night in the distance, only the cries of the iron crows echoed faintly. The surging undercurrent was not limited to the interior of the Donbua. As the commotion spread over the past few days, it had more or less attracted the attention of outsiders. Long before that, Vice Principal Isaac had called, but he seemed to have more confidence in Huaishur than he did in himself. Other than reminding him that the school had plenty of human resources and that they could be mobilized at will when necessary, he didn't care about anything else. In the middle of the night, Huaishur received an unexpected call. Tengu Mountain. I heard that you've been covered in dirt recently. You're in a very sorry state. The mocking laughter of the day Tengu drifted over. Even those of my generation who are in the border prison mountain have heard of you. Did it spread far and wide? Huaishur was slightly stunned. That's a little embarrassing. It's just a disease of the skin. A gentleman can take advantage of it. For someone like you, little brother Huaishur, I'm afraid this is the only way. There's no need to be ashamed. Rather than saying that it's shameful, it's better to say that this proves your virtue. After the day Tengu spoke, a strange smile appeared on his face. In any case, if you need any help, feel free to speak. There's no need to worry. It's just a small matter. Huaishur shook his head. It's because it would be a joke if I had to trouble others for something like this. In addition, I don't want to give the day Tengu the chance to owe me a favor. Since this is the case, I won't say anything more. But after all, this is the current situation. Don't act recklessly. The day Tengu rubbed his chin. When he thought of how ruthless this junior was, he couldn't help but click his tongue. Most probably, the people of the looming dojo were also hoping for such a situation to occur, right? What could be more delightful for a schemer than a hero going on a killing spree and injuring civilians? However, from the tone of the day Tengu, Huaishur didn't lose his composure. Not only that, the day Tengu felt slightly more at ease. I heard that there will be a meeting in Ingzhou tomorrow. Are you going there? Naturally. Isn't there someone who wants to see me in a sorry state? I don't want to disappoint them. Ho ho. Seems like there's going to be a good show to watch. The day Tengu nodded in understanding and didn't say anything else. He only reminded Feng Lin one last time. Be careful of the fire in your backyard. What's there to be careful about something that won't happen? Huaishur calmly replied. There's no place for flammable trash in my backyard. After hanging up the call, he inclined his head and glanced at the clock on the wall. The midnight bell rang out. Calculating the time, it was about time to clean up the trash. Won't come again? What do you mean? In the old city district, in the noisy old houses, William's followers once again received bad news. The person who answered the call angrily asked, Could it be that you want to betray everyone? Hey, say something. My wife is about to give birth. I have no choice. Next time, I will definitely. From the other end of the call, the high-pitched voice of a woman rang out. Very soon, the call was hung up. This is too much. He is clearly doing this for everyone, but he actually wants to run away? The person in charge of the organization grumbled in anger, causing a wave of righteous indignation. Don't be too harsh on him. He might have been coerced. William sighed and spoke in a meaningful tone. Everyone is working together for the sake of fighting for the rights and benefits we have won. The closer it is to a time like this, the more we have to be united. How can we be harsh on our compatriots who are also being trampled on? Everyone must remember that only when we truly have a right to speak can we allow our compatriots to stand freely under the sun. Mr. William is right. Tomorrow, we will teach the Donbua Corporation a lesson. The good days of those sanctimonious fellows are coming to an end. For a moment, under William's encouragement, the originally slightly low morale was restored to enthusiasm and was filled with hope. Only when the old man turned his head, in the shadows where the light could not find, a trace of gloominess appeared on his face. He was suppressing his anger. This was not the first participant to quit midway. As early as a few days ago, many people had already disappeared. Those who were already familiar with them also began to use all kinds of excuses to brush them off. When there was profit to be gained, they were all extremely enthusiastic. But when it came to the real deal, they all wanted to retreat. In the end, it was because these cheese were living too good a life. Unlike the anger he felt in other places in the past, there was no hostility at all. Their edges and corners had long been worn away by this seemingly peaceful life. They were completely a group of people who could not be trained. Fortunately, brave men were bound to appear when there was a large sum of money. There were still more participants who stayed. It didn't matter if they believed in freedom and hoped that he didn't believe in, or if they wanted to make a big profit out of it. This group of scum that even the other mixed breeds looked down on could still be used. People followed the crowd and were always ignorant. Once the fire was lit, it would become bigger and bigger like a rolling snowball. After the water was muddied, which fish could stay out of it? As for whether they succeeded or not, was that still important? Or rather, it would be a joke to expect this group of people who had abandoned themselves and were addicted to forbidden drugs, who would take risks for a little bit of money, or who were simply stupid to the point where they could not see the situation clearly, to succeed. They were just a group of cannon fodder. It did not matter if they lived or died. But it was precisely their existence and the turmoil that they caused that was enough to shake the legitimacy of the Doomsday Corporation's existence, weaken the halo that existed on Huaishur, and beat the so-called king of Doomsday back to his original form. Did a chaotic Doomsday Corporation really need to exist? When the time came, it would be the world of the Wanderers' Alliance of Freedom. After repeatedly checking the name list, his originally faintly uneasy heart gradually calmed down. These days, that kind of uneasy premonition had been lingering in his heart. It had been smooth sailing, and there were only some insignificant bumps, but it gradually seemed that something was different. The situation seemed to have begun to change. He had clearly been very familiar with this trick at the various borders, but this time, he kept feeling his heart palpitate. It seemed to be calm, but there seemed to be an invisible iron wall erected. It could not be seen or touched, but it was closing little by little. It brought about an illusion of suffocation. It was as if, in response to their performance that had been jumping up and down all this time, that pair of arrogant eyes that were high above finally lowered their heads and glanced at him. It made William's heart tighten. After sending off the participants, William returned to the secret room and summoned his trusted subordinates again. "Have you found the people?" "Don't worry, Mr. William. We are professionals in this." The smoking man patted his chest and promised, "We will respond to you tomorrow. When the signal is sent, people everywhere will be mobilized. Let's make this city lively." "Very good. I won't say anything unnecessary. Remember your reward after the matter is done." William nodded in satisfaction and then asked his subordinates to push out dozens of heavy boxes from the warehouse. "Tomorrow, ask your people to bring this." After the boxes were opened, the yellow light of the bullets illuminated everyone's eyes. The guns, and even the bombs that had been polished off, emitted the tempting smell of engine oil. "This is really a big deal." The smoking man beamed with joy as he stroked the silent steel. He already couldn't wait. The next day, when the sun rose, the entire city seemed to be shrouded in haze. Under the high-pitched sounds of the loudspeakers, the crowd on the streets gathered together, forming a long, winding dragon under William's shouts. The roars of anger and the roars of greed overlapped. In the crowd, William was lifted up and bathed in the sunlight. He held the microphone tightly and shouted to the crowd in front and behind him. "Today, we are united to fight for our own power. Take back our freedom. My compatriots, open your eyes. Take a look at everything that has been tortured. Take a look at the tears of the children and the old mothers. Oppose forced labor." The agitators in the crowd shouted fanatically, "Freedom! We want freedom! Down with Doomsday! Down with the Huai paper group!" In the parade, the crazy atmosphere had begun to surge. There were constant cracking sounds, and mass people on both sides of the street threw the bottles in their hands at the closed doors. Little flames began to burn. Thick smoke rose. The peaceful city welcomed restlessness and roaring. There were already masked people who excitedly smashed the windows and rushed into the shops, beginning to fight for the things inside. There were more people who couldn't resist the temptation and joined in. William laughed. His smile was illuminated by the flames, and he no longer hid the greed and ferocity in his smile. "Very good. That's it. Friends, Let's show those tyrannical superiors our backbone," he shouted as he led the procession towards the towering building in the distance. The surging crowd moved forward like a tide, with irresistible force, without any obstruction. Forward. Then, it came to an abrupt stop. It was as if a sweeping flood had hit a dam and a high wall, and could no longer spread. The restless crowd stopped one after another, causing William to look up in shock. But what blocked the front was not thousands of soldiers and horses, nor were the troops and legions armed to the teeth. On the wide road, it was empty. There was only one chair, placed in the middle of the intersection. The man leaned on the chair, propped up his chin, and looked at the rebels in front of him. In the face of the spreading violence, his expression did not change. He was as calm as ever. It was as if he was looking down at the dust. There was only one person, but he just stared coldly. It made the rioting torrent not dare to move forward, as if everything was frozen. At that moment, William lost his voice. "Why sure?" Chapter 990. Why sure? The King of Doomsday. At this moment, he was sitting at the crossroad in front of everyone, looking at them. Even after confirming it with his trusted aides, William still couldn't believe it. Only one person? There was really only one person who stood up and blocked the mob that was gradually going out of control. What did he want to do? Turn the tide? Only now did he stand up to appease the crowd? Who did he think he was? That was simply wishful thinking. Or we didn't want to kill all the participants. If that was the case, the effect would be even stronger than a demonstration. Did he want to destroy the Doomsday that he had created with his own hands? In his shock, William instinctively turned his head and confirmed the existence of the protectors in the crowd behind him. He subconsciously stepped back a little. He signaled his subordinates to cover him and leave later. He didn't have the determination to live and die with this group of cannon fodder. And more people had already started to clamor in the crowd, shouting all kinds of slogans and pushing the crowd forward. But this time, no matter how much they clamored and shouted in secret, the originally boiling crowd could no longer move forward. It was as if an invisible iron wall had appeared here, blocking in front of them. An undetectable chill spread, freezing the spreading flames. In front of that pair of eyes. Then, a low and deep voice sounded. It was obviously so low, but at this moment, it was as if heaven and earth were humming, causing the entire city to burst forth with a lingering sound that was everywhere. It was as if this city was also whispering solemnly, transmitting to everyone's ears. Perhaps some of you still don't know who I am. The man sitting on the chair looked down at the crowd in front of him and told them, "My name is Why Sure. I should be the guy that you are denouncing and want to defeat. I am the one who revived this city. Food, water, education, and even equal dignity. I gave you a peaceful life. If you want to see me, then I will stand in front of you. Everyone who has come to this city is my friend. You can tell me anything you want to say." At that moment, that calm face finally raised, but it caused a burst of pain in the eyes of all the observers, as if they were looking directly at the endless flames of the sun. "And now, some of you have betrayed me." It was difficult to see his eyes clearly. Only his solemn words echoed in their ears, telling them, "You should be ashamed." Dead silence. It was as if he had forgotten how to breathe. Because his lungs were stuffed with hard iron, the solidified air filled his mouth and nose. When such an iron-like majesty descended, countless souls would tremble. Not only were the participants who had been lured here, but even the people who had mixed in with the crowd and wanted to add fuel to the fire were frozen in place. William gasped for breath with great difficulty. He opened his mouth, wanting to scream and complain about the darkness and tyranny of the Doomsday Corporation. But now, when the rays of the scorching sun fell from the sky, he realized that when someone began to speak, no other voice would be allowed to exist in this world. William thought that he could create the situation. When he arrived, the situation was already under his control. In this piece of land, he was the one who fully deserved the title of authority. Supremacy. At this moment, before that pair of eyes, all the greed and hatred that was crowned with the name of courage was swiftly dispersing. Under the bright light, he couldn't help but tremble. Under the scorching sun, he bowed his head. But at this moment, what descended was not tyranny or anger. The sun was still shining. It was not cold, nor was it gentle. It just shrouded everything equally, so pitiful. I don't blame you for being perfect. Everything has flaws. On the chair at the crossroad, Huaishur calmly told them, as long as a person is alive, it is inevitable to make mistakes. It is also inevitable to be lured by others and make mistakes. This is not an unpardonable sin, but as long as you have eyes, you can see all the changes and understand where the future lies. As long as you have hands, you can recreate the life you deserve. No matter how glorious a promise is, it can't be compared to reality, because people will eventually wake up to where their lives and their happiness come from. So, don't worry and don't be afraid. He said, I will forgive you. At that moment, the frozen crowd stirred. Not only every participant, but even William could not hide his astonishment. It was as if he had heard unbelievable ravings and overly naive sleep talk. What was even more unbelievable was that the face that had never shown any coldness or ferocity from the beginning to the end did not waver at all, even in the face of the out-of-control rioters. He's lying. William roared hoarsely, trying to interrupt him. But even if he adjusted the volume to the maximum, it could not cover the words that echoed in everyone's ears. It was a guarantee from Huaishur. You have 1 minute to leave here, return home, return to your posts, and return to your old lives. You still have the chance to choose your own lives. At that moment, William realized in despair that everyone around him had a change in their eyes. It was just a few words, but it had actually shaken so many ideas that he had been instilling in them over the past few days. Now that things have come to this, you still dare to threaten us? Under William's desperate urging, the trusted aides in the crowd began to shout, this won't work anymore. Everyone, don't be afraid. They won't dare to do anything to us. Fight for power. Fight for dignity. The noise and clamor once again made William feel slightly at ease. What he truly relied on was definitely not this motley crew, or even the protection from the looming hall behind him. It was the black shadows on the tall buildings on both sides in the distance. From top to bottom, overlooking all the scenes, the reporters from the television station were quickly looking for a favorable position to occupy a high place. They even hired helicopters. Dozens of cameras were raised, aiming at everything that was about to happen. Hurry up and do it. Hurry up and do it. William even began to pray, full of expectation, constantly sending out signals, indicating to the teams in other places to quickly create a disturbance. When necessary, he could even let his subordinates hiding in the crowd shoot him. But no matter how he sent out signals, the teams active in other places did not respond to him. Only on the chair, Huaishur was gently counting down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Other than that, there was no other sound. It was silent. It was too quiet. Even the sound of breathing was so ear-piercing. The city was too quiet. It was so quiet that William seemed to be able to hear the sound of blood dripping in the distance. In other urban areas, in alleys, hospitals, warehouses, or bus yards, pale corpses lay in pools of blood, their empty eyes reflecting the sky or the narrow ceiling. In their hands were the guns that William bought from the black market. The locators hidden in the guns, magazines, and bullets were still operating, sending out signals to the outside world. The weapons sold by the black merchants of the 6 Association showed good effects and sent the users to their deaths as quickly as possible. At this moment, the foot of the mountain was patrolling in the pools of blood expressionlessly, checking one by one. If he found that they were still breathing, he would coldly pull the trigger. Behind him, his subordinates were swiftly carrying body bags, mops, and high-pressure water guns, cleaning up the scene in an incomparably professional manner. They moved the bulging bags onto the vehicles and sent them to the smelting furnace of the smelting plant. The cold hunting had long ended. Only the urging voice from the walkie-talkie kept echoing. The foot of the mountain lifted and stomped down. With a click, there were no more noises. At the crossroads, behind Huaishur's chair, 2 streets away, armed to the teeth police, as well as the apex masters in black suits with serious expressions, were already on standby. But they were not ready to rush up at any time. Instead, they stood firmly in front of the street, blocking in front of the angry sea. Crowds, innumerable crowds, a mighty torrent of people swept through the city. The streets, which were usually slightly empty, were now packed with people. Innumerable angry faces appeared. The citizens who seemed harmless and stupid were now like wild beasts. Their faces were flushed red, their eyes were bloodshot, and they waved the shovels, hammers, and all kinds of other things in their hands. They were choosing to devour people. After a short period of peace, the beastmen who rebuilt the city with their own hands once again showed their fiercest side, the side that should have been abandoned in the past. Compared to this mighty torrent that had no end in sight, the troops that William had painstakingly gathered could not even be compared to a small stream. At the front of the guards, Winnow was sweating profusely. He was trying his best to stop the furious crowd from rushing over the fence. At this moment, all the guards and apex masters here were not trying to suppress the so-called protest and resistance. Instead, they were trying their best to protect those idiots from being torn apart by the crazy citizens. All the people who were maintaining order were complaining incessantly. Sir, don't be agitated. Wait a minute, don't fight. Let's talk nicely. F***CK. Why did someone bring a gun here? Guns. Hurry up and confiscate this thing for me. Winnow's expression suddenly changed. He rushed forward and pulled the long-barreled shotgun that an old man was carrying on his shoulder. Sir, hurry up and go back your body. Are you blind? Winnow, don't you recognize me? The hot-tempered old man rushed in front and slapped him. Back then, when I was following President Heaven-Eye, who were you? How dare you block my way? As he spoke, he snatched the shotgun from Winnow's hand. Amidst the angry shoving and tearing, these old things simply took off their clothes, revealing all kinds of dragon, tiger, and demon tattoos. Some of the old men had already grabbed their nephews who were blocking them. They even beat and kicked them, educating them on the spot. F***CK, are you even human? Do you have any balls? The enemy is already at our door, and you still dare to block me. F***CKU. At the front, a skinny old man with 2 katanas in his hand stood at the highest point and shouted at the crowd behind him. It's those bastards who want to cause trouble. Kill those sons of cheese. Kill them. Countless shouts and roars came from the crowd. For the Alliance. Compared to the angry crowd, even the large number of guards at this moment seemed too few. So few that it was like a thin layer of paper, unable to withstand the impact. Soon, behind the crowd, 2 large trucks let out high-pitched screeches, causing the crowd to split to the sides. Then, they brazenly smashed through the fence. Winnow stood in front of the truck and stared at the flood of people in front of him, dumbfounded. He slapped his bald head. It's over. This is the mission that boss gave me. What should I do? Mr. Winnow, what should we do? The subordinate next to him was at a loss. How the F***CK would I know what to do? Winnow snatched the rubber baton from his hand. The veins on his forehead were already bursting with hot blood. He grinned, revealing his sharp teeth. At this time, of course, we'll do what others do. After saying that, he actually raised his weapon and joined the crowd while shouting, disappearing into the surging sea of people, leaving only his subordinates standing there, dumbfounded. What are you waiting for? Those who reacted quickly turned around and shouted at these idiots, follow them. Thus, there were no more restraints. The endless sea of people surged forward, sweeping forward and swallowing everything. Chapter 991. When the thunderous shouts in the distance and the countless footsteps that shook the tall buildings sounded, the original parade in front of the intersection had completely shrunk. In less than a minute, more than half of the people quietly retreated and fled. Apart from William's trusted aides and the people he hired who were still hesitating, there were very few people left. And now, they finally heard Huaishi's last words. The judgment from the king of Damboa. I've always told you that the people who come to Damboa are my friends. Huaishi sat on the simple folding chair as if he was sitting on a solemn throne. He expressed his last compassion to the rebels in front of him. From now on, you're no longer my friends. You're no longer under my protection. You have to learn to grow and be strong at the same time. Face the storm outside alone. Get to know this cold world. But before that, you have to accept the fate of the betrayers. Accompanied by the spreading words, a thunderous roar burst forth. It came from behind Huaishur. It was like a surging tide, causing everyone to widen their eyes in shock. It was not the fierce guards, nor the cruel and ruthless extreme Dao. At this moment, coming out from behind Huaishur were furious, mixed-race citizens. They were the beastmen who always had a smile on their faces and were immersed in a peaceful life. Some of them were even wearing department store uniforms. Some seemed to have just come from a ramen stall, holding a colander in their hands. They were men and women, old and young, poor and rich. When facing the thugs who wanted to destroy their peaceful lives, the hostility and murderous intent hidden in their souls were like flames about to burst out from their eyes. Kill this bunch of idiots. Anyone with eyes could see it, and anyone with ears could hear it. At this moment, not only William, but even the reporters on the tall building and the audience in front of the live broadcast channel witnessed a miracle that they had never seen before in their lives. What would happen when the anger of an entire city erupted? Guards? Bloody suppression? Merciless sanctions from the Damba Corporation? Was that necessary? He didn't even need to do anything special. Huaishur only needed to do nothing, and that was enough. The ferocious power hidden in this city would crush all invaders into dust. The mighty crowd opened up on both sides of Huaishur and closed up in front of him. In an instant, it swallowed up the panicked marchers. It engulfed William's pale face. Amidst the clamor, Huaishur leaned back in his chair, raised his head, and sighed. Looking down at the helicopters in the sky and the reporters and cameras on the tall buildings on both sides, the corners of his mouth curled up in disdain. The freedom you speak of, that's it? In less than 3 minutes, the riot that everyone thought would affect the entire city was strangled to death by countless angry hands. 5 minutes later, the ambulance arrived and sent the guys who were rolling on the ground to the hospital. 7 minutes later, the ramen stall had been set up again by the roadside. The hungry townsfolk lined up to eat the noodles. After eating, they wiped their mouths and rushed back to work. He was in a hurry. However, every time they passed by the intersection, they would pause for a moment. When they looked at the side of the chair, they would respectfully greet it. Then the person sitting there would smile and nod in response. After politely knocking on the door and returning the borrowed chair, Huaishur took his coat from Yuan's hand and turned to board the car that had been waiting for a long time. Just like that, he disappeared without a trace under the gaze of the camera. On the tall building, only the reporters looked at each other and were speechless in front of the camera. They didn't know how to continue explaining. An hour later, in the capital, Looming Hall, the gorgeous door opened for the first time in front of Huaishur, allowing him to drive straight in. Behind the door, the people who were running back and forth were stunned when they saw the figure who walked in. When that pair of eyes swept over, they couldn't help but take a step back and bow their heads. It was clearly the Looming Hall who invited him to attend the meeting, but when Huaishur really arrived, they revealed such a surprised expression. It was as if they had invited others to dinner during the new year, but they didn't expect that others would really come to their house. The decoration is good, but unfortunately, the style is a bit old-fashioned. Huaishur looked around the scene, stamped his feet slightly, and said rudely, "There is a musty smell. You really should open the window to get some fresh air." The expression of the attendant who led the way in front twitched. He pretended not to hear it and quickened his pace, but his head hung even lower. Finally, when they came to the door of the conference room, Yuan handed over the documents and information. But just as she was about to leave, she heard Huaishur's voice. "You come with me." Huaishur turned back and said, "You still have work." Yuan was stunned for a moment. Before she could react, Huaishur had already pushed the door in front of her. The solemn conference room suddenly fell into a short silence. When everyone looked back, they finally noticed the late participant. Their expressions became really interesting. In the conference room where most of the border and forces of Ingzhou gathered, The emissaries and leaders from all sides had already been seated, and the meeting had even begun. Before Nan could finish his speech, he was interrupted by the sound of Huai-Shur pushing the door open. Obviously, even if he was in Looming Hall, his subordinates had already sent the news from Donbua. At this moment, when he saw Huai-Shur coming to the door so openly, the corner of his eyes couldn't help but twitch slightly. Oh, it's starting to get interesting. In the middle of the long table, the absent-minded Daitengu raised his head slightly. The long nose mask on his face seemed to reveal a strange smile. He took out a small wine pot from his arms, shook it slightly, and sniffed the wine fragrance. There's going to be a good show to watch. What's wrong? Why isn't everyone talking? As if he didn't have the slightest awareness of being annoying, Huai-Shur walked into the conference room. Then, he directly pulled out the empty chair next to Nan and sat down. He threw the document in his hand on the table. When he looked around, his expression was exceptionally curious. You all seem to be very disappointed. Did I miss something? No, the meeting has just begun. Nan replied. Mr. Huai-Shur came at the right time. That's great. Huai-Shur breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. Something troublesome happened. I thought I was going to be late. Fortunately, I didn't waste too much time with those useless people. On the other side of Nan, the staff officer Nado's face faintly turned ugly. The hand holding the pipe tightened. Nan's bearing was still graceful. He just said indifferently, "It's normal that humble people don't know how to be grateful. Mr. Huai-Shur, you don't have to worry. Just teach them the rules." Yes, good intentions don't pay off. Huai-Shur sighed helplessly. Some people, you have done so many things, but they don't even say thank you. They're still thinking about your family's property. They really don't know the rules. The ridicule and malice in his words almost overflowed, causing the expressions of all the members of Looming Hall to change. It was second only to a slap in their face. But no one had the confidence to refute. Donwa's hot surge hadn't gone down yet. How could he have the face? In the entire Looming Hall, it seemed that only the stinky sister on the left was still calmly drinking tea and looking at the embarrassing jokes of the old man. Nanan stood still. The old man didn't seem to understand at all. He calmly raised the information in front of him and continued to speak. The border defense we mentioned before, according to the gods, before he could finish his words, a series of rapid vibrations sounded. It came from beside him. On the table in front of the staff, Officer Nato, the phone screen suddenly lit up. For a moment, it attracted everyone's attention. Nato was stunned. When he saw the caller ID on the phone, his expression changed slightly. After hanging up the phone, he bowed and apologized. In front of the distinguished guests, "Don't be rude." Nan glanced at his subordinates unhappily and continued. "According to everyone, buzz." The vibration sounded again. It still came from the table in front of Nato. Everyone looked again. The phone was still vibrating. It vibrated again, and the screen lit up. Nato hurriedly pressed the phone. He was about to say something, but the phone soon vibrated again. It made Nan's gaze become colder. Nato was sweating profusely. He was about to say something, but he heard a curious voice from across the table. "Why didn't you pick up the phone?" Huai-Shur held his chin and looked over curiously. He smiled. His smile was full of malice. "Look, he's calling again." The phone vibrated again. This time, it was a different phone number. Nato froze on the spot. The phone hung up, and the phone lit up again. It hung up again and lit up again. The phone number kept changing, but every phone number came from the secret forces of Looming Hall. The evil spirits of the underworld. Those evil spirits that had sent out to eradicate the spirit world. Why is your face so ugly?" Huai-Shur asked in confusion. "Did you do something shameful?" Crack! Nato's face was ashen. He closed his fingers and crushed the screen of the phone, cutting off the discordant noise in an instant. "Forgive me for my rudeness." He stood up and bowed to Nan. "Please allow me to leave and reflect on my mistakes." Nan nodded expressionlessly. He was about to criticize him, but this time, before he could open his mouth, the horrifying ringtone sounded again. From the completely damaged phone, the cracked screen lit up again. Wisps of scarlet red flowed out from the cracks like blood. They kept flashing and urging him to answer the call. The resentful aura was transmitted along the radio waves. It flowed out from it and formed a cursed seed from a long distance away. It sprouted and grew on its own, causing the broken phone to vibrate continuously. The ringtone became sharper and more ear-piercing. A ghost call. This time, the phone was connected without waiting for NATO's reaction. From it, sharp cries and hoarse moans kept appearing one after another. Roars and screams were endless, and there were also vague, sorrowful cries. Lord NATO, I'm in so much pain. Save me. Please save me. I'm so lonely. I'm so sad. Why are we the only ones suffering? It's so dark. I can't see anything. Those distorted voices echoed in everyone's ears, causing NATO's expression to twitch. He could not hide his fear and anger. The others looked at each other in confusion. Only Weischer picked up the teacup and took a sip. He could not help but narrow his eyes as he savored the dense fragrance. He praised sincerely. Good tea. Chapter 992. At the same time, outside Jingdu, less than 50 kilometers away from the city, countless lush trees formed an endless sea of trees, decorating the pure white buildings in the canyon, like a fairyland. The sign of Home of Souls, hanging on the gate, was still spotless. The sanatorium, which was claimed to be a new type of soul treatment, was actually the headquarters of a religious group. In this country, which was famous for all kinds of religious groups, such places were not rare. In fact, there were so many of them that they were uncountable. The hierarch was known as the reincarnation of Jesus. He never showed his true face to people. He only showed his face to the world through a curtain to get rid of disasters. This was not rare. There were many rich businessmen among the believers and sponsors. This headquarters cost billions of Ingzhou dollars and was designed by a famous architect. In the eyes of the believers, this was an ideal place like heaven on earth. Only the believers who had followed the hierarch for many years were qualified to give up all their assets and enter this place. They could live a self-sufficient rural life, cultivate crops, and enjoy a beautiful and fulfilling life away from the world. After death, they could enter the home of souls in heaven forever and never have to worry. No matter how one looked at it, it was just an ordinary group of swindlers. Those who were sober would scoff at it, but it was not worthwhile to compete with this kind of religious group that was full of fools. After all parties paid enough money, naturally, there would not be any blind police who came to make trouble. Under the noon sun, the most sacred time of the day, in the auditorium, pious praises and songs of the believers came from the most sacred time of the day. Amazing grace, how sweet! My sins have been forgiven. I was lost a long time ago, but now I am found. I was blind, but now I can see. In the pure white auditorium, the walls depicted a peaceful scene. The world was harmonious. Regardless of race, old or young, people all over the world held hands and looked at the hopeful future with a smile. When drops of blood slid down the wall, the pale faces were dyed with a wisp of bright red. When they looked down, their eyes became more and more lively. In the darkness that even the scorching sun could not illuminate, countless sticky bloods surged like snakes, flowing out of the sluggish bodies and turning into a scarlet blood pool. Surging, the mysterious hierarch in the past, the high priests, and even the holy messengers were now immersed in the deep blood pool, forgetting themselves and singing loudly. The gradually melting skeleton raised its head and bathed in the sunlight that leaked through the dome window. The empty eye sockets were filled with the light of happiness and peace. Black blood flowed out like mud, passing through the serene smile and falling down bit by bit. Under the command of the conductor's baton, the sacred hymns reached the climax. I'm also quite talented in music. On the highest sacred altar, the young man who directed the chorus looked back at the guests behind him and smiled. Don't you think so? When the evil spirits from Jianshan broke into the headquarters, they saw such a ferocious and terrifying scene. The moment he was stared at by that pair of eyes, he felt the malice from hell and the deep coldness of the deep sea. In the blink of an eye they had the mission situation. Let's go. The commander, codenamed Green Ghost, But it was already too late. Outside the canyon, the sunlight was suddenly cut off and endless darkness attacked. The enormous shadow of Shang-Qing slowly rose, like a python coiling around its prey, surrounding the entire village of souls. The pair of huge eyes looked down, like cold stars, spilling a malicious light. The secret instrument rooted in the countless corpses and the origin of pain in the deepest part of the canyon had already completely covered and sealed this place. Countless curses fell from the sky like rain, shrouding everything. The enormous and ferocious silhouette appeared from the gray rain and wandered through this hell. It was like a giant trampling on the earth, echoing with rumbling sounds. This place was already hell on earth, even before the little cabin in the forest came here. Since you're already here, why are you leaving? On the altar, the little cabin in the forest turned the baton in his hand that was randomly carved out of bones and pointed at the group of sluggish evil spirits, smiling, "Come and sing with me." In that instant, boundless darkness swallowed everything. Eternal wails and screams sounded, tearing apart the false hymn and resounding through the darkness. When the long chanting finally came to an end, there were only countless melted and sticky remains left in the blood pool. They were entangled with each other, and their hollow faces were filled with foolish smiles or pain. They were immersed in endless nightmares and fantasies, unable to wake up anymore. Soon, there was a bone-chilling chewing sound. Thousands of voices rose and fell from the blood pool. Under the secret instrument of evil cannibalism, those broken souls were immersed in endless greed and began to crazily devour everything around them. Only the bone baton in the hands of the little cabin in the forest hovered, like a spoon stirring in a cauldron. An invisible flame burned everything, and in the end, even the bottomless blood pool dried up. Only a wriggling abyssal fetus spasmed in the pool. On its deformed body that resembled a baby, thousands of mouths let out high-pitched cries and wails. The quality is not enough. It's still useless. Relying on this group of leftovers, this is the best I can do. The little cabin in the forest wiped the sweat on his head and threw the broken bones aside. Looking down at the dying fetus under his feet, he squatted down and stared at the pairs of eyes filled with hatred and pain. Suddenly, he asked curiously, "You've been out for so long. Do you want to call home?" So soon thousands of cries sounded from Nato's phone, and countless vicious curses emerged from the chaotic electromagnetic waves, turning the conference room of Looming Hall into hell in an instant. "Nato! Nato! Nato-sama." At this moment, in front of all the participants, the evil spirits of the past had turned into genuine evil spirits. They wriggled out of the phone bit by bit, tugging at the corner of his clothes, causing his face to turn pale. But before the curse descended, a storm appeared out of thin air in an instant, and a faint cold snort came from the source of the wind, dissipating the countless curses. The storm closed, and all the wreckage disappeared, leaving only a messy conference room. Everyone looked at each other. The Fifth Order of Looming Hall made a move. Huaishir felt the cold gaze that was cast on her through the countless walls. She held the teacup and calmly savored the sweet taste of the tea. "What a sin." He sighed sympathetically. "Does your Looming Hall also owe wages? You see, they came to ask for wages, but they were beaten out. It's really miserable." For a moment, several gazes that were suppressing their anger landed on him. But Huaishir calmly put down the teacup. As if nothing had happened, he asked curiously, "Didn't you say there was a meeting? Were we just now? Hey, why aren't you talking?" Nanan looked at him for a long time without any expression, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He just signaled his subordinates to drive Nato out of the room. After restoring the calm in the conference room, he picked up the manuscript in his hand again. Just now we were talking about bang, bang, bang. A series of hurried knocks on the door sounded, causing Nanan's 5 fingers to suddenly tighten. His face was ashen, and he could no longer hide his anger and ferocity. But the subordinate who pushed the door ignored his angry expression and quickly stepped forward. After leaning over and whispering a few words in his ear, his expression changed. At the same time, There was a continuous vibration in the conference room. A pop-up notification from Tomorrow News. Asian headlines. Damboa, the harbor. A moist wind blew from afar. Ordinary goods. Well, it's indeed ordinary goods. Two samurai with swords lowered their heads and looked down at the corpses that had been cut into pieces by the sword blade. They shook their heads and sighed. The few ascendants who were protecting William were even killed by the two guardians who had launched a sneak attack in an instant. Tinda coldly shook off the blood on the blade, wiped the blade, and put the sword back into the sheath. Looming Hall is really getting worse with each generation. He glanced at the dirty Kamigawa with disdain. And you? Why are you like this? Ah, sorry, Thomas-senpai. I accidentally got a little excited. The swordsman, who looked like an old monkey, waved his hand, took off his blood-stained sportswear, and threw it aside. But the bloodstains on his face could not be wiped away with a handkerchief. The blood on the blade seemed to be flowing endlessly, dripping endlessly. Energetic shouts came from afar. The Kyoto, who had taken off their jackets, rolled up their sleeves and were stirring the cement in full swing. Dust flew up. Shanya wiped the sweat on his face and suddenly asked, "Hey, Yamashita, let's go for a drink tonight. I recently found a restaurant that makes good grilled squid." Yamashita thought for a moment with a shovel and shook his head. "I don't like seafood. What about ramen? It's too oily. I don't have an appetite." "Hey, have you become more and more picky about food recently?" Shanya said with disdain. "Don't be like a kindergarten child who doesn't eat vegetables. It's all because the place you chose is too tasteless. Don't blame others. Also, move faster. There's too little water. Are you really working in a construction company?" "I work in an office. And even if it's a construction site, there's no need to feed people cement piles every day. Okay? Just do enough." Behind the two, the sound of hard bumping and shouting could be heard from the sealed gasoline barrels. "Look, we've been dawdling for too long. They're already awake." Shanya scratched his head. "Just do enough, right? You've only fed a few people, and you're already slacking off? It doesn't matter if it's more or less. At most, we can share it. They won't care anyway. Then let's do this." At the foot of the mountain, he shook his head and waved his hand. Immediately, a subordinate rolled a cement bucket over. After opening the lid, a frightened, middle-aged man poked his head out. He wanted to say something, but then a machine started. The cement in the huge pipe rushed out and covered his face. The lid was closed. The next one, and the next one. In the end, the pale-faced William was pushed to the front. In the barrel, he struggled and screamed, No, I'll give you money. I have a lot of money. 10 million. 10 million. 50 million. 50 million is fine too. US dollars. It's all in US dollars." "Hey, Shanya." Yamashita smoked and seemed to be deep in thought. "What's wrong? Why don't we have ramen tonight? Do you have soy sauce?" "Ah, I prefer pork bones." Shanya thought for a moment and suggested, "Do you want to challenge Dongshia's Ijo's hellish spicy set meal?" Yamashita shook his head. "Why don't we drink?" "Okay, let's drink." Shanya nodded and pulled the handbrake. Amidst the roar of the machine, screams could be heard. Soon, only vague curses were left. In the barrel, William cursed, "The Alliance of Freedom won't let you go. Never." Sob. Sob. In the end, the face was also covered by gray cement. The lid was closed. Half an hour later, the quick-drying cement had been sealed with a thick layer of crust. Rows of cement barrels were lined up and rolled to the edge of the sand dredger. 1, 2, 3, with a splash, water splashed. It was a success. The sea breeze in the distance blew gently. The vast expanse of blue waves rippled slightly. The sky was clear and cloudless. It was a good day. Far away at the border on the gray coast, it was raining cats and dogs. At the headquarters of the Wanderer Alliance of Freedom, Anna stood in the elevator, chewing gum and looking up at the change of the floor indicator. Ding! The elevator door opened. The light illuminated the girl's red hoodie. Under the hood, a smile appeared on her young face. Towards her prey. Chapter 993. 15 minutes ago, in the city center of the Gray Coast, a tall building was bathed in the torrential rain and stood tall in the fierce wind. At the top of the building was a gorgeous villa that occupied the highest point and the best view. In the courtyard, the sound of rain was dense. In the study, there was dead silence. Fail, the old man, who usually had a solemn expression and an honest face, lost his voice. Didn't you say it was a sure thing? What about William? He asked. Where the hell did William go? I don't know. We're also investigating. Investigate. All you know is to investigate all day long. What's the use of having a bunch of trash like you? President said, roared, and smashed the phone with all his might. He paced back and forth in the room for a long time before finally calming down. He stretched out his hand, and a subordinate handed him a new phone. After making a few calls and confirming the situation of all parties, he returned to his seat and fell into deep thought. He quickly made a decision. We can't get involved in Damwa's matter anymore. He looked up and said coldly, release an announcement that the matter in Ingzhou was caused by the scum William alone. It has nothing to do with us. Remove William from his position and department. But if we do that, the subordinate was slightly stunned. If William comes back, can he come back? Said sneered. That guy had been eyeing his position for a long time. This time, he made a deal with Ingzhou behind his back and wanted to drag others down with him. Think of it as for your own good, William. Die in Ingzhou obediently and take the blame for yourself. It's good for your family and others. Although he would lose some of his income from the border of Ingzhou, and it would make him feel a little pained, where there's life, there's hope. Wasn't the reason why the Wanderers Alliance of Freedom was able to survive in so many borders as a hybrid organization because it was safe, harmless, and amiable? Although Damwa's appearance had pierced through the Alliance of Freedom's most precious mask and caused their income to continuously drop these days, after this test, they had already realized the huge gap between them and Damwa. They no longer dared to have any thoughts of revenge. Not only that, but he was also prepared to lick it. If there was money, they could earn it together. Everyone was seeking benefits for their compatriots. He had so many resources and channels in his hands. As long as he licked it hard and with heart, was there a need to worry about not being able to make money? Just like that, he quickly decided on his future course of action. He picked up the phone and told his secretary, connect me to Ingzhou's line and get someone to contact Damwa. I want to find a chance to talk to them face to face. There was no reply from the phone. There was complete silence. Seth froze for a moment and realized that something was wrong. He picked up his phone, but there was no signal at all. He subconsciously stood up, and when he heard the gunshots outside, he quickly realized what was going on. He decisively turned around and walked toward the secret passage. But this time, no matter how hard he tried, there was no response. Only the sound of wailing could be heard outside the room. His expression suddenly changed. He reached out and took out his weapon from the hidden compartment. He carefully pushed open the door of the study and breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the person sitting in the chair in the cubicle. That was the bodyguard he hired every year with a large sum of money, a famous Tier 4 expert in the financial center of Grey Coast. What's going on, Mel? Humir didn't turn around. He just raised his hand and stopped him from moving any further. Boss, stay inside. Don't come out. This time, it might be very troublesome. In the silence, only the sound of footsteps could be heard coming from outside the door. The sound of gunshots rang out continuously and quickly died down. The dull thuds of people falling to the ground were continuous. In the end, scarlet blood flowed in silently from behind the door. Sed's face gradually paled. In the dead silence, there was a soft knock on the door. Is President Sed inside? Please don't be agitated. I'm coming in. Hold your weapon properly. Don't misfire. Don't hurt yourself. A blade so thin that its thickness couldn't be seen flashed through the gap of the door, causing the heavy solid wooden door to open silently. It revealed the hell behind it. There was also a sweater dyed red with blood. Under the hood, the girl opened her mouth and blew out a bubble. With a pop, it broke and stuck to her mouth, but was quickly swallowed back. In an instant, Hugh stood up. Faint flames wrapped around his fists, and his killing intent was ferocious. But Anya didn't seem to see him at all. Her gaze swept past the unbeatable opponent and landed on her target. Hello, Mr. Sed. It should be you, right? You may not know me, but you must know who my teacher is. Looking at you, you should have guessed it, right? The girl smiled. Because of your actions, my teacher sent me here to teach you a lesson. Wait. Let's talk nicely. Said took a step back in panic. He clearly had an expert protecting him, but he could feel the bone-piercing coldness of that thin blade. He almost couldn't breathe. Please wait. I can pay the price. Any price is not a problem. We can show our sincerity. If you're prepared to be taught a lesson, that's for the best. Anya nodded and sighed regretfully. But it's a pity that in the Inquisition, there's only one lesson, and there's only one price. And these two things are the same. Death. In that instant, the Type 4 sublimated set exploded. He rushed forward and roared, causing the glass of the entire floor to shatter. The wind and rain in the sky were disturbed by that violent punch. A strong gust of wind blew Anya's hood away, causing her long hair to flutter in the air. But she didn't care as she stepped forward. She allowed the iron fist to rush forward and finally stopped at the tip of her nose. It stopped abruptly. If you want to stop me, you can't use this kind of fist that can't hit people. Anya raised her eyes and looked at the bodyguard in front of her. It's okay. Don't be afraid. If you think you can protect your employer from the Inquisition's assassination skills, then you should give it a try. But do you think you can succeed? Or should I say, she paused and grinned. Do you really have a guts? Said didn't speak. His expression was gloomy, and his killing intent surged. But in the end, he didn't dare to take the initiative to attack, even if he could crush the girl in front of him with one punch. Think carefully, Mr. Bodyguard. Anna yawned and put her hands in her pockets. If you stand in front of me, whose enemy will you become? If you try to stop me, what will happen to you? The difference between her and her enemy was so great, but she didn't care at all. It should be said that from the beginning, she didn't care about the other party's bodyguard. This was because she had never represented herself, and the one who had chosen to send this blade to Ced had never been Anya herself. But compared to the opponent in front of her, something more powerful than this kind of power that was exchanged with money, and something more dazzling than this kind of thing that struggled in the dark swamp. Just like this, she smiled and looked at the opponent in front of her. She asked seriously, "Do you want to be my teacher's enemy, Mr. Bodyguard?" Dead silence. The man didn't speak. The iron fist trembled. Was it anger or fear? Hey, Ced, don't listen to her nonsense. Ced's expression was ashen as he roared. We have a contract. We have a contract. Do you think she will let you go? Don't forget what this bitch is here for. Ced still didn't speak. Only silence. Struggle. Anna took a step forward, reached out, and pressed his fist. If you haven't thought it through, you can slowly think about it. My work still needs a long time. You still have time. But for now, please don't get in the way. She said, I'm going to work. Just like that, she casually pushed away the iron fist that was enough to destroy her and brushed past the last obstacle. In the study, Ced staggered back, raised his hand, and pulled the trigger with all his might. He had used up all his bullets, but bullets wouldn't work. He opened his mouth and wanted to speak, but Anya only slightly pulled out one of her hands from her pocket and waved it. A thin and invisible blade swept past, and a section of his tongue fell out of his mouth. Hoarse screams sounded, along with vague roars and curses. Don't talk, be quiet. The girl raised her finger and put it in front of her lips. Then she bent down, took off the small backpack on her back, and pulled out a heavy hammer from it. There was also a pitch-black long nail. The long nail, which was as thick as a forearm, was stained with a layer of dark red. After being soaked and contaminated by the blood of countless heretics, it was almost pitch black. Then there was a hoarse scream. As if he had foreseen the future, Ced retreated in horror and fell to the ground. Then he climbed up with his hands and feet and even wanted to rush out of the window without caring about the height. However, the invisible thin blade had cut off the fascia of his hands and legs, leaving only a small wound. He fell to the ground, but was pulled up violently, and his left hand was pressed against the wall. Don't move. Anya bit the handle of the hammer in her mouth and gave a vague order. She pulled out a long nail with her other hand and pointed it at his twitching palm. Then there was another scream. The long nail pierced through his palm, and he was barely able to fix it to the wall. Then she took off the hammer in her mouth and aimed it at the iron nail. Smash! Accompanied by a dull sound, a hoarse scream burst out along with the vibration of the floor. Don't you all call yourselves saints? Call yourselves saviors? The girl squatted down and looked into his eyes. If that's the case, why don't you take the place of your compatriots and bear this original sin? Why don't you accept this fate that suits you? In the Inquisition, this is the highest treatment. The second iron nail was raised and aimed at his right hand. Sed screamed and begged with tears in his eyes, but he could not stop the hammer from falling. Anya took a step back and looked at the man on the wall. She measured the height and heaved a sigh of relief. She did not have to redraw the nail and hit it again if the two sides were not aligned. On the wall, Sed no longer shouted angrily. He cried in pain and whimpered, but whining would not work. It was as if he had never cared about the tears of his compatriots. Hope and freedom, dignity and a future. My teacher told me that these are the most precious things in the world. Anya suddenly said, for a long time, you all have made a living and profited from it. Oppressing your own people, deceiving those who trusted you, betraying their ideals, and sitting on their corpses to enjoy the fruits of their labor. In the end, you meticulously weave an illusory bubble, but you don't dare to let others see the real thing. Because once the real thing appears, everyone will know that you are fakes. Just like that, he conveyed the words of the king of Dombois. Anya looked up and looked into his eyes. She told him word by word, there is no need for such people to exist in this world. So it's time for you to die. Bang! The last nail pierced through Sed's body. Covered in blood, it wedged itself into the iron stone. She turned and left just like that. Half an hour later, Sed Atten, the president of the Wanderer Alliance of Freedom, a well-known public welfare organization, a philanthropist, and a freedom fighter, died in his own study. He died of blood loss. What was puzzling was that the first aid kit to stop the bleeding was at his feet. Unfortunately, no one came to his rescue. Another half an hour later, the news from the Tomorrow News caused an uproar in the entire territory. Chapter 994. There would always be some troublemakers in this world. There would always be some people who acted recklessly, never suffered losses, and never cared about the rules. Even the slightest bit of carelessness would cause trouble for themselves. For example, Huai Shi, and Huai Shi, from Jinling to becoming the king of Dombois, he had been beheaded. This time, the disaster sword did not let everyone down. Even though they were disgraced by a moment of underhanded means, the situation had been completely reversed in less than a week. With just a few words, the almost formed rebellion was dissolved in an instant. Just by sitting at the crossroads, the disaster sword mobilized the power of an entire city to serve her. This prestige, which was almost engraved in the souls of countless people, was indeed breathtaking. But this was just the beginning. In less than 3 hours, the Spiritualist Society and the Wanderers Alliance of Freedom had already declared GG. The ferocity of the revenge, the swiftness of the speed, and the cruelty of the methods were simply shocking. Little Hut in the Woods, who had single-handedly stewed the Spiritualist Society into porridge, was still okay. This was not surprising to everyone. After all, he was the leader of the Sixth He Society. Although it was a bit exaggerated, it was still reasonable. What happened after that started to become ridiculous. From beginning to end, Anna had not concealed anything. She had taken public flights, subways, visited video game centers, taken taxis, bought local specialties, and even registered her name and contact information at the front desk before entering the building. She had almost written the name Huai Shi, the murderer, on the wall. In the end, Huyen did not even dare to fart. For half an hour, Sed was nailed to the wall and died of blood loss. At least 800 people passed by, but no one dared to put him down. As for why, it was because this was Huai Shi, the Huai Shi who had chopped up a great master for fun. Did the Astronomical Society not care? Then, the Central Countermeasure Room of the Central Bureau responded half an hour later. Specifically, They approved Huaishi's Yellow Pages approval for the Wanderers Alliance of Freedom. Okay, first kill, then make up for the votes. The Astronomical Society was so overbearing. If they were not happy, then don't play. Moreover, he was already dead. What else did they want? Moreover, the key was not what they wanted, but what Huaishi wanted. Did they think it was over just because they were dead? What a joke. There was even a one-stop service to grind their bones and scatter their ashes. Compared to the chain reaction that followed, even Seder Atten's death paled in comparison. The moment he was nailed to the wall, Tomorrow's News received an ultimate gift of more than 400,000 words, including audio recordings, video recordings, notes, transfer records, and more than 4,000 witnesses. This included all the scandals that the Wanderers Alliance of Freedom had committed over the years since its establishment. On the surface, they were fighting for the rights and interests of their compatriots, but they were secretly trading with various forces and illegal organizations, selling people with beast characteristics, conducting racial experiments, creating riots in various areas, stirring up ethnic conflicts, and even murder, abduction, and framing. There were simply too many to count. There were also 7 or 8 other organizations of varying sizes that claimed to fight for the rights of the Beastmen. There were even some that had reached an agreement with some orders, regularly delivering them the living sacrifices needed for rituals. Tens of thousands of mixed-race victims scattered across the border stood up to testify. Just because the king of Donbua, whom they had never met before, asked them to help him, they stood under the spotlight without hesitation. The ripples caused by this swept across almost all the borders. In less than 5 minutes after the news was posted, Tomorrow's News rushed to the headlines of the Asian region through the number of views and paid subscriptions. It was instantly pushed to every user's mobile phone. In the next 15 minutes, the officers of the Central Command Bureau worked overtime like crazy and began a large-scale purge operation. Whether they were lying in bed, working in the office, or taking half a day off, they all had their blood pressure raised to the maximum and were caught to work. Not only did they investigate the various organizations involved, they even relied on various channels to track down the culprits and began a new round of rapid attacks. It was unknown how many hidden illegal organizations had suffered. Thanks to Huaishi, many branches completed their quarterly KPI in advance. They no longer knew whether they should stab Huaishi's figurines or erect Huaishi's memorial tablets. Everyone regarded this as a successful expansion of celestial genealogy. With this operation and the protection of human rights, their influence once again penetrated deep into every border. Unfortunately, it was too early, too reckless. If this was done 2 or 3 years later, it definitely wouldn't be so hasty. Now, the Heavenly Kingdom lineage had to focus on the War of the Worlds. The remaining manpower and energy were not enough to fully take over the power gaps left behind after the destruction of these organizations. They had to give out a portion of the benefits that they deserved. They had not done everything they could. But for Huaishi, every day counts. If he could use this to save one more person, what was the loss of a portion of the benefits? Although the sudden increase in workload and the subsequent complicated wrapping up made the vice principal complain and regret boasting in front of Huaishi, he was the first to vote in favor of the school administration meeting. What was there to be afraid of? At most, he could create a few more time-axis clones to work overtime. The people of celestial genealogy don't even need overtime pay. Why would they be afraid of this? It could be expected that in the next half a month, the heat of this matter would not die down, and the names of celestial genealogy and Huaishi would once again be deeply rooted in people's hearts. The image of Donbua would once again be sublimated and become an unshakable paradise. As for the groundless riot, who cares? This matter could be blown up to this extent. In addition to the driving force behind the ivory tower, the strong support of Tomorrow's News, and the sensational crimes committed by the Wanderers Alliance of Freedom. What was shocking was that the Wanderers Alliance of Freedom even cooperated with the official organizations of the modern realm. In the more than 400,000 words of evidence, at least 100,000 words were about this. So who was this lucky partner? In the conference room of Looming Hall, Huaishi held his chin and looked at the hosts in front of him, whose expressions had changed abruptly, and smiled. The other participants in the conference room looked down at the headlines on their phones. When they clicked on the first one, several familiar faces appeared. Videos of private meetings, recordings of transactions between the two sides, records of repeated transfers of money through the border, and even the support behind the scenes, as well as the instigator behind the scenes, including the staff officer NATO. A total of 16 people were all dug up. Of course, there was also the list provided by the stinky sister who, in the end, all the suspicions pointed to the current head of the capital, Nan Zhong Chong. Perhaps many of them were groundless accusations, but this did not prevent Huaishir from using public office to avenge private wrongs. This has nothing to do with me. Under the gaze of everyone, Nan's expression kept changing. His mind was racing, and he quickly made a decision. It's all done by the people below, behind my back. I don't know. It was simply the signature method of Ingzhou to shift the blame. Well, maybe the subordinates went alone. Huaishir nodded in realization, as if he believed it. He said casually, "It is said that in this country, there is a culture of tacit understanding, relying on the so-called tacit understanding through power to let the subordinates guess what they're thinking in their hearts, to figure it out, and to carry it out." Huaishir, Nan was furious. "Don't slander me. I didn't say anything. I just sighed." Huaishir replied coldly. "As a superior, you don't want to take responsibility. As a subordinate, you don't want to fulfill your duties. To be honest, this atmosphere is really disgusting." Nan's expression twitched. He gritted his teeth and squeezed out a voice from between his teeth. "I'm innocent. I have nothing to say to you. This matter is purely groundless accusations and has nothing to do with the looming hall." "Are you sure?" Huaishir nodded. "If this matter has nothing to do with the looming hall, then it's even easier to handle. Next, I will begin to take revenge on all the people involved. I only hope that everyone won't make a scene when the time comes." "Enough!" Nan slammed the table angrily. "Too presumptuous. Huaishir, don't forget where you are." "Of course this is the reality, Mr. Nan." Huaishir replied calmly. "It's just a shabby garden. It has been glorious for some years, and it also has a history that seems to be very proud of. Besides that, is there anything special about it? Or is it that milk and honey flow in its river, and figs grow on its trees? Of course, I haven't forgotten where I am. At the same time, please don't forget who I am. Now, you can ask yourself." Huaishir probed and looked at his face. "Do you know who I am?" Nan's expression twitched and turned livid. When he was ferocious, he seemed to be choosing someone to devour, but soon he forced himself to calm down. Only who was watching the show, did not hide his mockery. "Now you finally remember that he is the representative of celestial genealogy, the inheritor of the utopia recognized by the whole world. You finally realize that the political game of stick and carrot doesn't work on some people. You expect to use alms to exchange for his friendship? What kind of sweet dream are you having? Now it's time to wake up." Mr. Nan faced the cruel reality. "There's always a limit, Mr. Huaishir," Nan said in a hoarse voice. "Do you have to force everyone to fight to the death?" No matter how tough his words were, anyone could see that he was tough on the outside, but weak on the inside. If it was not in front of so many people in the conference room, but in private, he would have said something even more unbearable. The so-called politicians were such creatures from the beginning. Shame was the most unnecessary thing to them, especially in a place like Ingzhou. "Look at you. It's as if I want to do something." Huaishir smiled so gently. "Of course I believe that you are innocent, Mr. Nan, right?" Nan's expression softened slightly. Before he could say anything, he saw Huaishir push the documents on the table over. It was placed in front of him. Nan's expression froze. Then he heard Huaishir's voice. "However, someone has to pay the price, don't they? The instigators and participants behind this incident are all here. If you really want to show the world your side's fairness and innocence, then please help me kill them all," he said. The smile that had not appeared on Nan's face froze. It was as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Chapter 995. In the conference room of Looming Hall, there was dead silence. Not only Nan Nan and his subordinates behind him, but even the other participants widened their eyes in shock. They couldn't help but feel a chill at the back of their heads. It was as if they had seen someone drive a car and rob the food reserves of the Ijo giant panda base. Daitengu almost exclaimed, "What a guy!" Originally, he thought that he would be able to see a battle of words today, but he didn't expect that Huaishur would skip all the steps and quickly go to the full liquidation. Moreover, he wanted Looming Hall to do it personally and kill their own people to give Huaishur the job. Could there be such an operation? This was no longer a face-saving output, but a direct loss of power and humiliation of the country. If Nan Nan dared to nod, not to mention the others, the people below would probably start singing Miliuo Abyss, and his whole family might be punished by the heavens. For a moment, he froze, and his action of lowering his head to admit defeat stopped. And Huaishur seemed to have noticed the eyes behind Nan that were about to spit out flames of anger. He nodded in understanding. Indeed, it's a little too merciless to let Mr. Nan kill his own subordinates. Please be magnanimous. Nan Nan's expression twitched violently. He lowered his head stiffly and squeezed out a forced smile to curry favor, asking for a sky-high price and returning the money. A moment of humiliation was nothing. As long as the matter could be wiped away, it was easy to talk about. That's not impossible. Huaishur glanced at the old man who lowered his head and told him, "But you have to express your apology, Mr. Nan Nan. You're being so humble, I thought I did something wrong." Nan Nan lowered his head and stiffened for a long time before he said with difficulty, "I'm sorry. It's all my fault." And Huaishur didn't seem to hear it. He just turned around in confusion and looked at the people around him. "I don't know much. Is this how the people of Ingzhou apologize? Why is it different from what I heard?" Dead silence, a long, dead silence. Nan Nan seemed to have been petrified. The veins on the back of his hands bulged out as he grabbed the robe on his knees tightly. After a long time, he slowly got up and knelt on the ground amidst the grief and indignation of his subordinates. He closed his eyes, his hands on the ground and his head lowered. His seat. "Please forgive me." In this meeting room, only the sound of teacups falling to the ground was so ear-piercing. All the participants glanced at each other in dismay. They didn't expect that they would be able to witness such a miraculous scene. Even the Daitengu's mouth was dripping with wine. He had lived for so long, but he had never seen anything like this before. Under the sunlight outside the window, Huaishur sat on a chair and looked down at the figure kneeling and apologizing. There was no smugness or mockery. Calm as always. He merely nodded. "Very well. Since you know your mistake, I don't need to say anything else." He pressed on Nan Nan's shoulder and comforted him. "Just follow the traditions of Ingzhou." As he spoke, he reached behind him. Yuan stepped forward and handed over the gift brought by Huaishur. It was a slender wooden box with elegant workmanship and exquisite decoration. When it was opened, it revealed the brocade inside and a saber forged by Huaishur himself. It was specially selected from the Dambwa Smelting Factory's special alchemy steel, inlaid with gold and jade. The pure white shark skin was spotless. Indeed, it was the best choice for traveling and giving gifts to friends and family. At this moment, it was delivered to Nan Nan, who was in a daze. Huaishur gave an order. "Let's perform a C-section, Mr. Nan Nan." The silence was broken. Someone slammed the table in anger and stood up, wanting to rebuke. But when Huaishur raised his head and looked over, he was instantly frozen by that cold gaze. It wasn't malevolent or angry. It was just calm, like a dark abyss, reflecting the trembling souls in the room, causing the words he wanted to say to freeze. He froze on the spot and didn't dare to move. "What's the matter?" Huaishur asked. "Is there a problem?" No one replied. Ever since he stepped into this meeting room, the killing intent that had been brewing in his heart was no longer concealed. His gaze was filled with disdain, warning everyone who dared to interrupt him. Whoever moved would die. Since he came here today, someone had to die. If not, could it be that he came here to put on an act and teach others the meaning of mercy? He had already finished explaining the meaning. Now it was time to settle the score. Even if it was a fraction, a millimeter, a tiny bit, Huaisher lowered his head and looked down at the opponent under his feet. He reminded him coldly, Lord Nan Nan, it's time to show the strength of a warrior. Don't disappoint people. I. Nan Nan stared blankly at the knife in front of him. His lips were trembling. It was difficult for him to make sound. He wanted to ask if Huaisher was crazy. Did he want to start a war? But when he saw that pair of eyes, he understood the answer. This group of lunatics didn't leave any leeway at all, and they wouldn't give him any other choice. Either he died here today, or the two sides would start a full-scale war. But when he turned his head around in a daze and looked behind him, he found that there was silence. There was no voice, and no one stood up to defend him. There was only a cold gaze from the deepest part of the looming hall. He finally came to a realization and smiled bitterly. Now that things had come to this, what else could he say? Other than this, what other way could he prevent the Ingzhou genealogy from triggering this unjust war? What other way could he protect his family? He closed his eyes, stretched out his hand, and took the knife in Huaisher's hand. He pulled the knife out of the sheath. The bright blade reflected on the decaying face. He bit it between his teeth. Then, he tore open his clothes with both hands, revealing his chest and abdomen. Sitting upright, the sound of the blade piercing down was so low that it made everyone's eyelids twitch wildly. Accompanied by the sound of a horizontal cut, a viscous liquid flowed out. Come! Nan Nan straightened his body, raised his head, and glared at Huaisher. Huaisher was indifferent and motionless. He just waved his hand. Yuan walked out from behind him, pulled out a heavy sword, and stepped past. At the moment of passing by, there was a perfect arc of light in the air. As if the world was moving, the majestic sound spread out from the sword. The solemn iron light cut off the last shackles. It illuminated his turbid eyes. The fleeting light was so beautiful and soul-stirring. It's so beautiful, Nan Nan sighed softly. His old body crawled on the ground, and there was no more sound. Only the blood spread silently. There was dead silence. Yuan's wrist moved slightly, shook off the blood, put the sword back into the sheath, and returned to the teacher's back. Her work was done. After a long time, in this silence, where only heavy breathing was left, Huaisher waved his hand, brushed off the blood drops on his cuffs, and finally withdrew his gaze from the ground. There was no wild laughter, no indifferent disdain, just calmness. Looking back, he looked down at those dumbfounded or indignant expressions. Thank you for your misplaced love. You have put so many expectations on me that you shouldn't have. So much so that you always want to teach me some principles of how to deal with people. He said softly, maybe you think I'm the same as you, but in fact I'm not the same as you. I never thought of playing games with you. There are more important things in this world and more worthy work to complete. Unfortunately, you are not included in it. I hope you can take care of yourselves. In the end, I wish you all a long time in the future. Huaisher got up, held his collar, and nodded politely to say goodbye. I'll leave. In this way, he stepped over the body on the ground, pushed the door open, and left. The ancient, decaying door closed behind him like a clap of thunder. Passing through the crowd gathered in front of the door and stepping down the steps, he was unimpeded all the way. When the dark car disappeared at the end of the mountain, above the sky, the huge scope sign that covered the entire looming hall gradually became transparent and disappeared without a trace. In the same afternoon, in the rest area of the headquarters of the Astronomical Society in Border London, under the dark clouds, it was drizzling. It's raining again. No matter how long it takes, I can't get used to such weather. Russell sighed softly, withdrew his gaze from the window, pulled out a chair in the coffee shop, and said to the waiter, black tea, strong, and a tiramisu, thank you. The waiter nodded and left. On the other side of the table, the man reading the newspaper raised his eyes and looked over. Mr. Russell, there are many empty tables here. It's okay to gather together. It's more lively, isn't it? Russell smiled, full of enthusiasm, but his gaze always fell on the other person's throat, the broken scar. Mr. Rene, I always feel that we should improve our friendship to avoid some misunderstandings. He paused for a moment, and his smile became mocking, so that some people won't ask for trouble. Renee looked coldly at Russell for a moment, folded the newspaper in his hand, and just said, "If I were you, I would be prepared to face the inquiry, instead of coming here to show off." Ingzhou has already submitted serious protests and condemnations to the central decision-making room half an hour ago. It doesn't matter. I also submitted it, and I was 15 minutes earlier than them. Russell shrugged indifferently and scooped up a spoonful of dessert. Moreover, there's also the Ingzhou Command Bureau's illegal operation first. The decision-making room will definitely give me an explanation. I hope you are also prepared to face the inquiry. Sai, when the time comes, do you think we should get together? Maybe we can copy each other's papers or something. Let me tell you, it's so fun. Renee frowned and looked at him coldly for a long time before slowly saying, "The matter of the Ingzhou branch was decided by my subordinates on their own. It has nothing to do with me. The point is, they are your subordinates, right?" Russell sighed softly. "You really live up to your Ingzhou surname, Minister Renee. Is it because of your bloodline, or is it a convergence of styles? When you are asked for instructions, you don't say a word and pretend to be profound. Then, you let your subordinates figure it out, and when something happens, you let them take the blame. This is really not a good habit. You should pay more attention. Isn't it more important to pay attention to that disaster sort of yours, who has enemies everywhere?" Renee sneered and retorted sarcastically, "There will be no friends in everything you do, Russell. The utopia never needs those kinds of useless friends. We only need their obedience." Russell spread out his hands mockingly. "You see, this is the difference between us. You always want everyone to be harmonious, hold hands together, and live freely in a beautiful world. What kind of thorny ape is this? Is a Sassi going overboard? Mistakes will never be corrected by themselves. You always need to help in the middle. This way, the garbage will roll back to the trash can on its own. I've only killed one person, and you're already screaming like chickens at the slaughterhouse. If necessary, I should kill more. Please don't think that we are a charity organization just because that kid Huaisher is easy to talk to, okay? You issued the yellow pages without approval, forced the directorate to make a decision, broke into the headquarters of the Ingzhou branch, and forced an important minister to commit suicide. This has already affected the stability of the present state." Renee reminded him coldly. "I hope you can understand the seriousness of the matter, Russell. The directorate will not play house with you. As an educator, I have to say that this is really a thought-provoking story. It could be written into a textbook. It vividly tells us a truth." Russell looked at him and said sympathetically, "If you do something wrong, you have to be punished. Are you threatening me?" Renee frowned. "Of course not. It's just a friendly reminder." Russell shrugged. "After all, Dambois is there. We still need to get along harmoniously for a long time in the future." "I hope so." Renee picked up the coffee, drank it in one gulp, and waved to the waiter. "Bill, please. Please sign here, sir." The waiter brought the bill. "Oh, let me do it." Russell enthusiastically reached out and took the pen from Renee's hand. Then, smoothly, he stabbed it into his neck. Poof! There was a soft sound. Amidst the waiter's ear-piercing scream, Renee widened his eyes and looked down with difficulty. He saw the pen that was stabbed into his neck and the hand holding the pen. It was so stable. Blood spurted out. Then there was a sharp pain. "Just take it as a small lesson, Mr. Renee." Russell let go of his hand, picked up the napkin, and carefully wiped the blood on his fingertips. "Let me think. If there is any truth in this story that needs to be remembered by children, it should be—" He bent down and whispered in Renee's ear, "No one can have *King touch my student. Don't even think about it." Huff! Huff! Renee lay on the table, twitching with difficulty. But no matter how he called out, there was no healing light from the sky. It was as if he had been forgotten. Except for the waiter who was paralyzed on the ground, no one else noticed. He opened his mouth and wanted to shout, but he could only cough violently. He coughed up a large amount of blood on the pure, white tablecloth. The coffee cup fell to the ground, and the sound of it breaking was so crisp. As for Luo Su, he was just quietly looking down. He let the convulsing hand continue to pull him. He watched as Rene suffocated in his own blood bit by bit. His face was expressionless. After a long time, he slowly stretched out his hand, pulled out the pen, and casually threw it in front of Rene's eyes. It was stained with blood. The lie was dispelled. So, this messy corner finally returned to the coffee shop, causing a stunned look and shouts. Now, Russell handed over the bill. You can pay the bill. Chapter 996. The next morning, Huaisha received a call from Russell. It was still the usual bulabula. He seemed to be in a good mood and was even humming a song. Sai, since you've already settled the looming hall, then don't do anything to the Yingzhou branch. Russell emphasized, after all, you still have a part of the staff in the Central Command Bureau. We're all colleagues, and harmony is most important among colleagues. Listen to your teacher, forget it. Haha, I don't believe you. Huaisha rolled his eyes. Did you do something again? What can I do? Russell asked innocently. Can I be like you and poke the director's throat? I'm not young anymore. Huaisha, don't be so impulsive. Be more mature. Don't leave a bad impression on the leader and make people think that Xiao Huai is an unreasonable young man. The corner of Huaisha's eyes twitched wildly. You seem to be making me laugh. What are you laughing at? Don't laugh, be serious. Russell said seriously. I'm talking about cooperation in London. The atmosphere is good. Everyone has a good afternoon tea every day. Don't spoil the fun. Otherwise, you'll suffer if the negotiation fails. Okay, that's it. I'll hang up first. After that, he hurriedly hung up the phone, which made Huaisha's expression twitch. He felt that Russell, the old bastard, was going to sell him again. No, maybe it was already sold out. Now he called to ask him to calm down. He didn't know what kind of dirty deal he had with the Central Command Bureau behind his back. Forget it. He was too lazy to care. Although he was a little unhappy that he didn't teach the Yingzhou branch a lesson, the old bastard had spoken, so he had to give face. He yawned, swiped his card to open the elevator, and went all the way down. Domba's smelting was now beginning to take shape. This place was more or less like the base of the villains in TV dramas and movies. In addition to the endless buildings that occupied a large area on the surface, a considerable area was also excavated underground. With the help of the scholars, digging holes was much more convenient. As long as the design conformed to the law and the material provided was strong enough, it wouldn't be a problem to dig as much space as he wanted. He could even convert the soil and stone on the spot while digging, even saving the transportation of soil and stone. These days, in addition to the design of the Heavenly Palace, Huaisha had been immersed in it. It was because of the looming hall that he had taken a few days off. To be honest, farming was simply too enjoyable. Even though the Book of Destiny didn't have much to write about, personally experiencing it was completely different. Watching as one area after another was developed, moving in all kinds of equipment according to the plan, and finally assembling one casting furnace after another. The assembly line was connected to each other, and finally, production began. Watching the assembly line operate continuously brought an addictive sense of accomplishment. The fourth production line should be completed today, right? Huaisha asked the supervisor beside him. That's right, but because we don't have much experience in the art of forging, we're lacking manpower. We might not be able to meet the requirements of the original plan for the time being. Manpower shortage? Huaisha scratched his head. After thinking for a moment, he waved his hand and said, ask for it from the American Genealogy Department. The supervisor was dumbfounded for a long time. Will they give it to you? Why wouldn't they give it to training talents for free? With me, the only remaining caster at that time, guiding them step by step, and a large number of internships, they've taken advantage of it. Hurry up and ask them to send a few hundred more people over. Huaisha said, by the way, go back and increase the working hours of the American interns by another 2 hours. Won't the manpower shortage be greatly alleviated soon? Then help me ask Taiching Heavy Industry if they need talents in this area. We could train them on their behalf. Remember to tell them that the American Genealogy Department is already far ahead in this area. Are you human? The supervisor almost fell on the road and felt a chill on the top of his head. This wasn't all an illusion. After all, He was bald and had no hair. This was the rhythm of overworking the group of American sublimators. Was it really addictive to whoring for free? What's with that look in your eyes? Huaishur turned around and looked at him with a serious expression. Let me tell you, regional discrimination is not good. No matter who it is, if they come to Damboa, they are part of Damboa. As everyone knows, Damboa is part of the Ivory Tower, and the Ivory Tower is the headquarters of celestial genealogy. Celestial genealogy is the representative of the utopia. Rounded up, they were also members of the utopia. Everyone has to play to the excellent traditions of the utopia. First, they are not afraid of hardships, and second, they are not afraid of tiredness. If there are difficulties, they have to do it. If there are no difficulties, they have to create difficulties. It's just over time, it's not a problem for us heavenly state people. Huaishur patted him on the shoulder earnestly. You have to believe them. It's not that I don't believe them. I just don't believe that you are human. The supervisor wiped the cold sweat on his face. His brain had automatically converted Huaishur's long speech into a dog barking similar to Russell's. Anyway, you don't want to be human anymore, right? Since that's the case, I won't pretend to be a gentleman anymore. I'll deduct their overtime pay as a meal allowance. Thus, a small problem was solved in a few words. Everyone was happy. With the development of Damboa, the layout of the smelting industry had become more and more complicated. The paper industry at the top was a group formed by the Ivory Tower, the Enfant Consortium, and the Australian Grassland. Huaishur was the main shareholder. There were also many subdivisions below. It could mainly be divided into the research center established in Damboa, the production base established in Enfant, and the cooperation department established in Australia. After being criticized by the looming hall, Huaishur simply flipped the table and stopped playing with these idiots. All external business was transferred to Enfant, which was under the jurisdiction of his sister. In any case, they had a monopoly on the transportation of minerals in Australia. No matter how bad it was, Taiching Heavy Industries would take over. There was no need to worry about not having business. With Damboa shipping as a channel to make money, Damboa would not have no income. Moreover, the goal of the research center was not to produce. It was the research and development of technology. In addition to carrying out experiments on the fusion of casting, alchemy, and scholar's law, it gradually became Huaishur's private land. It became the largest casting base he had made in the present world as a caster. After Huaishur's application was approved, a large number of equipment in the Twilight Village was transported here after in-depth inspection. After debugging, it was reinstalled. Unfortunately, due to the warning of the Astronomical Association's Yellow Page, the core left by the King of Casting could not be sent into the present world, and the Eternal Frost Furnace could not be recreated. According to Russell's words, the conditions are difficult. You have to make do with it. Leave the things here and don't move around. I'll get you an independent boarder. When the time comes, you can change the cage for another bird. Won't you have the final say in what you want to do? As for the output here, it was all supplied internally. After some operations, Huaishur was now an important supplier of celestial genealogy. It was just not known if this was considered using power for personal gain. Casting itself was a hellish technology that spanned both the fields of scholar and alchemy. In addition to making full use of the properties of materials, it also had the ability to combine with hell's disaster to refine them. Although it was not as precise as the alchemy workshop and could not be made lightweight, it had one advantage, and that was mass production. As long as the assembly line was set up, it could be mass-produced at any time. There was no problem at all with the preliminary rough processing. Now, the main production was divided into 3 parts. Most of it was supplied to the iron crystal base for the construction of the Sky Fortress. A small part of the fine processing production was taken up by Beelzebub. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. The reconstruction of Osiris depended on this poor child's accumulation of small water pipes over a long period of time. With this base, it was only a matter of time before the skeleton was completed. As for the other important equipment, it was probably not something that could be done with money and time. The remaining part was resources that Huaishur could use at will. Although it was less than 1/3 of the total, There was no problem for Huaishur to squander at will. Besides, the foundation that Huaishur had laid down for Dambwa to be established was all thanks to celestial genealogy. If it was not necessary, even his part was used to supply the iron crystal base. It was just that it was temporarily interrupted these days. When the exclusive elevator reached the bottom, it was completely Huaishur's private domain, deep in the mountains at the bottom of Dambwa Industries. At the same time, it was also where the largest casting furnace was located. It occupied 1/3 of the entire R&D center's funds, mobilized the material resources of the ivory tower, and based on the structure of the eternal frost furnace and Huaishur's own casting furnace, it was a giant that was created by a single power station. It had only been completed a few days ago. In the huge hall, other than Huaishur's chair, there were only countless matrices that extended to the ceiling. There was also the broken spear, dead water, floating in a light pillar in midair. Before he became Lord of the Clouds, he had to complete the final work. It was about the recasting of dead water. Although he had completely accepted Ying Fangzhou's inheritance, dead water was incomplete after all. Huaishur could not master Ying Fangzhou's fierce and violent spear techniques that used thunder as a spear. If he wanted to truly master Lord of the Clouds' power, he had to first upgrade and recast dead water as a carrier, and then turn it into his own origin substance equipment. Huaishur did not need to worry about the repair stage. After giving the order, the casting furnace had been completed over the past few days and had undergone preliminary modifications. Now that the light had dissipated, the dead water that fell into Huaishur's hands was completely different from before. It was not as long as the complete dead water. After retaining the power of dead water, it met Huaishur's requirements and maintained a length that was convenient for use with other origin substance equipment. The total length was 3 feet 3 inches and 7 minutes, 124 centimeters. It was only half of dead water's original length, which was the most comfortable length for Huaishur to hold with one hand. Apart from the area around the handle, the 4 edges of the spear protruded forward slightly, and the front of the spear had been completely flattened. This kind of shape had nothing to do with the spear at all. After referencing Eastern Xia's strongest weapon, the Qilin Fu Sangguang's two-handed god striking whip, which was also famous for its use of thunder, he had completely modified it into a truncheon. Now, everything was ready. Huaishur waved the truncheon in his hand twice, then turned around to look behind him. "Fang Shu, are you ready?" The old man smiled and nodded. Chapter 997. It was late at night, and there was no one around. An 18-year-old boy with a weapon in his hand looked at the elders in his family with shining eyes. Was this the extinction of humanity or the decay of morality? It could only be said that this scene was not quite right. Of course, this was not because Huaishur had lost his mind and wanted to use Fang Shu to test his blade. On the contrary, he needed Fang Shu's help to recast dead water. Although it had been repaired by the casting furnace, filled in the broken parts, and adjusted to a suitable length, in fact, the essence of dead water had not changed. Now it was just a shape. Whether it was the unity of spirit and essence in alchemy's source material, or the quality of Tiansheng in casting, it did not meet the requirements. It was impossible to break off the screen of the laptop and say it was a tablet. It could be said that there were countless things that were missing. Dead water was the same. After falling from Cloud Lord to Xiangjuan, it suffered a break. Finally, under the final blessing of Ying Fangzhou, the fierce, hateful water returned to the original appearance of dead water. After so many experiences, it could still play a role, which proved its excellent performance and the depth of the obsession in it. The sacred mark still maintained a stable shape, but after a slight repair by alchemy, it returned to the appearance of Xiangjuan. But just like Ying Fangzhou himself, it was so firm that stubbornness was not enough to describe it. It was difficult to modify it, and the usual methods would not work at all. It was easier and faster to buy a tablet than to change the laptop into a tablet. What's more, this was not a DIY project, but an alchemy application involving divinity. To make it go one step further and completely transform and be reborn, Fang Shu's help was indispensable. In fact, not only Fang Shu, but even the entire stone marrow hall was moved over. In the framework of the Creator, it was not difficult to open the God mode. The real difficulty came later. Huaishur intended to use the structure of Tian-Ke to recast Deadwater, which was an attempt for himself to advance to Cloud Lord. And the foundation of Tian-Ke was the stone marrow hall itself. To be precise, it was the spiritual coffin itself. When Huaishur ascended to young Arbiter of Fate, he had already used up all of the effects of the coffin through the ritual. However, the coffin itself still existed and was deeply integrated with the stone marrow hall. What Huaishur wanted to do was to completely separate the two. If such a precious material as the spiritual coffin was used as the foundation, the success rate of the subsequent construction of the heavenly palace could be increased by at least 30%. At the same time, it could perfectly contain Xiangjuan's divine mark and prevent it from clashing with the following reconstruction. Tongyi had written down every step of the process in detail, including the specific steps and theories involved. However, Huaishur couldn't understand anything except for the part about forging and a small part about alchemy. It also involved the field of scholars, and then it entered the extremely mysterious field of quantum physics. To put it simply, it was to put the rebellious Xiangjuan into a box like a cat, and then let it be in a superposition state between existence and non-existence, followed by a bunch of nonsense. After a series of operations, it was finally done. There was no need to worry about any accidents. The cat was your cat, the house was your house, and the spiritual coffin was your hall. Feng Shu was your uncle, your father, your mother, and your grandfather. One of them was about to play the role of your entire family. How could they not cooperate? As long as they followed the instructions, there would be no hidden dangers. Moreover, there were double the precautionary measures. Even if they accidentally messed up, the worst that could happen was that the house collapsed and they had to move to another house. Feng Shu wouldn't have any problems at all. After repeatedly confirming this point, Huaishur finally agreed to proceed with the plan. But when it came to it, he couldn't be at ease. Moreover, using the spiritual coffin to lay the foundation of Tian-Ke made him feel guilty. It was like spending the savings of his elders to buy himself a sports car. I don't feel so good today. He gestured for a long time and asked hesitantly, "Why don't we talk about it tomorrow?" "No, I don't think there's any problem." Feng Shu replied with a smile. To think that an old bag of bones like me can still help young master outside of the kitchen. I'm already full of energy now. As he spoke, he even moved his body and put on a strong posture, indicating that Huaishur shouldn't worry. He spontaneously walked into the layers of secret instruments and sat on the chair. "Let's start," he said. Huaishur sighed silently. Although it was shameful for her to become a coward at the last minute, it was better to be shameful than to lose her only family member if something went wrong. After confirming Feng Shu's state again, he lowered his head and looked at the detailed process in his hands again. After confirming every detail and the response to every mistake, he took a deep breath. He lowered his head and looked at the smiling old man on the iron chair in front of him. He spread his 5 fingers and covered Feng Shu's figure from afar. A metallic glow appeared on his right arm, once again forming the furnace that existed within his soul. Extraction began. In that instant, a low rumble suddenly appeared. This rumble came from the massive furnace that was embedded in the ground and enveloped the entire area. It began to absorb large amounts of electricity and origin substance. Flames began to appear in the furnace's heart, rapidly expanding and burning vigorously, illuminating everything. The complicated instruments on the alloy floor began to light up under the infusion of origin substance, surrounding the old man layer by layer. Immediately afterwards, the floor began to fade and become transparent, revealing the massive structure hidden beneath. Within the darkness, the silent stone marrow hall began to rumble. Countless bricks and tiles began to fall from the ceiling, and dust began to fly everywhere. It was as if an earthquake had occurred. However, the power did not come from the ground. Instead, it came from the core. The spirit coffin's arrays were awakened once again, and light began to shine from beneath the iron and stone. The entire stone marrow hall was filled with complicated circuits, just like a person's blood vessels. The miracles that had been merged into the massive structure were once again awakened. Then, under Huaishir's actions, they began to peel off bit by bit. This was the most difficult part. It was as if he was trying to peel off the white veins of an orange, but he couldn't damage its fragile flesh and skin. In order to do this, he needed the orange to actively cooperate. Huaishir's pinky twitched slightly, causing a bloody gash to appear on Feng Shu's face. One of the windows in the stone essence building below shattered. In order to ensure that the extraction process went smoothly, Feng Shu and the stone marrow hall were once again connected, as if they had returned to how they had been before they had become independent. He had become a part of the stone marrow hall. He was originally a spirit that had been born within the stone marrow hall. Controlling the stone marrow hall was like controlling his own body, and there wouldn't be any conflicts. However, the price he had to pay was that if Huaishir messed up, he would suffer a backlash before he could sever the connection. Even though he was certain that he wouldn't mess up, Huaishir didn't dare take such a risk. When the old man saw that Su Chen's movements had paused for a moment, he calmly looked up and wiped away the blood on his face. "Young master, please continue," he said. "It's just a small injury. It's not even as good as a kitchen knife." "Okay." Huaishir was silent for a long time before he nodded, and so they continued. Every moment, a huge amount of electricity and origin substance was extracted to fuel the furnace. The extraction process from a furnace was carried out slowly and carefully. Bit by bit, the coffin was removed from the stone marrow hall without leaving behind any side effects. It was as if they were undergoing a full-body operation. They were trembling with fear. However, Feng Shu, who was sitting in his chair, was abnormally calm. Halfway through the process, he even pulled out his phone and began to write an article for his public account. Daily Kitchen, Enjoy Health. Ever since it had been released, it had been well received by housewives. The average number of clicks per article exceeded 100,000. There was a single dish every day. It was delicious, easy to make, and not expensive. Unfortunately, it never carried any goods, causing many of the sponsors who had come to visit it to leave resentfully. "Young master, what do you want to eat tonight?" the old man asked casually. "Considering that Madame Tangyi's calorie intake has been a bit excessive these past 2 days, how about stewed coconut chicken? Recently, a batch of pretty good seafood arrived. Let me go over later and choose while it's fresh. At a time like this, let's not talk about seafood anymore." Huaishir laughed bitterly. He tilted his head and wiped the sweat off his face. "Can we talk about something more serious?" "Then, young master, when are you going to bring your girlfriend home?" After a long period of silence, Huaishir did his best to stop his hands from trembling. He said in a trembling voice, "Let's continue talking about seafood. I want to eat grouper. I think Miss Fu is pretty good." Feng Shu continued, "Even though Madame Ai Ching is very good, I feel like she doesn't know how to take care of people. Miss Lily is good at everything, but her parents aren't very good. I feel like there will be a lot of friction between the two sides in the future. Of course, if young master likes Miss Luo Xian more. Aren't we talking about seafood? Seafood is the topic just now." The old man smiled. "I just want to discuss an important matter in life with young master." "Shut up. How can it be a home before the utopia is built? Don't corrupt my ambition. My life has been dedicated to the glorious celestial genealogy. Women will only slow down the speed at which I draw my sword." "Then what about Madame Tangyi?" After a long period of silence, Crow stuck its head out from behind the observation window above. The corners of Huaishir's eyes twitched violently. "Feng Shu, if you provoke me again, please let me go. It's really difficult." Feng Shu sighed worriedly. Huaishir felt like his blood pressure had been pulled to the maximum. He almost forgot to breathe. He completed every part numbly and mechanically until he cut off the last connection. When he came back to his senses, he saw the light floating above the Stone Essence restaurant. Its head and tail were connected, interweaving into countless beautiful and complicated patterns. It was changing almost all the time. What was brewing from it was actually the radiance of the soul. That was the main body of the Stone Essence restaurant. Spirit Coffin. Now, Huaishur waved his hand, and the casting furnace started operating again. It operated at full power and completed the final extraction. Steel fell from the sky and enveloped the light of spiritual light. Then, it quickly shrank into a small dot, sealing the miracle that had lost its form and pulling it into the alchemy fire in the furnace's core. Once it left the material, the miracle would quickly dissipate and return to the world. It was like evaporated water vapor merging into the wind. The recasting had to be completed quickly. Huaishur turned his hand, pulled out the iron mace stuck in the ground, and threw it into the furnace's fire in the dome. The pale alchemy fire instantly engulfed everything. The casting began. Chapter 998. In the alchemy fire, the outline of dead water fell apart in an instant. When the steel binding Xiangjuan turned into surging molten iron, there was a mighty whale song in the fire, and a huge outline appeared in the furnace. Like a giant whale with a pair of wings on its back, it soared in the fire. Rock! At the same time, the alchemy fire suddenly shook and turned into dark red. Then, even the fire was torn apart. No, it should be said that it was like a solidified sand castle. It was washed away by the torrent. Endless dark red gushed out from it, flowing in all directions, diffusing, spreading, filling every corner of the furnace, almost tearing the seal and overflowing. The underground facilities were shaking violently. It was not a deliberate attack. After losing the control of Yingfang Zhou, it was just the miracle hidden in the divine mark, following the law of alchemy, naturally unfolding. Then, it turned into an endless sea, wherever it passed. Even the steel was quickly rusted, twisted, and broken, and was dyed with a layer of darkness, like the torrent of hell raging. And what made all of this was endless regret. The sea of regret. Long time no see. Huaishur sighed, looking up at the phantom of rock in the furnace, and felt unprecedented pressure. When this power was used as a weapon to fight against the enemy, what he felt was an unparalleled peace of mind and happiness. But when Huaishur really faced this huge regret, he felt that he did not know where to start. At this moment, in the furnace, the spiritual coffin quickly unfolded and covered Xiangjuan's divine mark. But it had reached the limit. But without the restraint of dead water, this regret would not stop at all. It was still surging and spreading, as if it would never stop. If it went on like this, once the structure of the spiritual coffin was destroyed from the inside, the power to heal the soul and restore the life would completely dissipate. At that time, there would be no need to talk about the foundation of heaven. However, if he destroyed the Kuan Peng, this sea of regret would definitely dissipate like rootless duckweed. But at that time, it would be impossible to recast it, and Xiangjuan's divine mark would be damaged. This is going to be difficult. Huaishur scratched his head and sighed softly. In the end, he was still unwilling to change. Aren't old people a little too stubborn? At least be more flexible. He flipped through the manual that Tongyi had given him and found a rescue plan. Just as he was about to activate the casting furnace to gradually eliminate the sea of regret, he found that the spreading sea had stopped. The spiritual coffin closed, sealing the inside and outside. The array from the stone marrow hall bound the ocean within and then shrank inwards. It was because on the steel chair, the old man raised his hand, his 5 fingers slowly closing. He held this regret tightly in his hands. Huaishur was stunned. Feng Shu. There was a cracking sound as blood flowed out from the back of the old man's hand. Young master, perhaps it's because I haven't lived long enough and haven't understood what regret is. But I feel that life shouldn't be lived for the sake of regret. Feng Shu raised his head and looked at Huaishur with a happy and gratified expression. When you reach my age, you will know that the most precious thing in the world is the present. The past was too heavy, and the future was too far away. If you don't hold the present tightly and only regret in vain, you will have nothing. So, you'd better bring your girlfriend home early. He reminded him helplessly. Otherwise, what if you become a bachelor like Mr. Russell? Even if you get married in your 40s or 50s, I'm afraid I won't be able to raise a child when you have one. I plan to raise a few more children when I can. In a daze, Huaisher didn't know whether he should be moved or helpless. But somehow, he couldn't help laughing out loud. I'll try my best. He shook his head. You're only 18. Why are you in such a hurry? Accompanied by these words, the huge door of the ultimate slowly appeared behind him and opened. A huge amount of source substance poured in, causing the fire to reignite from the deepest part of the darkness. And Huaisher stepped forward, welcoming the sea of regret step by step, towards the Kuan Peng. Why are you angry? Did I do something wrong? He opened his arms and greeted the spirit of regret. Come, if there is any mistake, please give me some pointers. How about it? Huaisher smiled. The high-pitched wail song sounded again. An invisible bridge connected between the two furnaces, causing the retracted sea to roar out, like the four seas bursting the dikes. In the mighty torrent, the Kuan Peng spread its wings to cover the sky, responding to Huaisher's call. It fell from the sky. In an instant, it penetrated his body, flowed into the ultimate, and went deep into his consciousness. The endless sea of regret disappeared without a trace. There was dead silence. Only Huaisher staggered back 2 steps, bent over, covered his throat, and widened his eyes, as if he had drunk an entire barrel of vodka in one breath. His face flushed. There was a blazing light emitted from his eyes, like 2 searchlights. This smell? He squeezed out a voice from between his teeth. Hoarsely, it's okay. Boom! The sound of the surging sea came from his body, causing him to tremble and almost lose his balance. Then, a series of loud noises erupted from the ultimate. On his steel-like right arm, the casting furnace opened again, those complicated structures operating quickly, friction producing sparks. Now, with the ultimate as the furnace, the water of the 4 seas was exhausted, and regret was reforged. Under the guidance of the casting technique, the casting furnaces all over the underground were activated again, spontaneously drawing the power reserve of the entire Dan wave to supply it here. It turned into blazing lightning and fell from the sky. But before it landed, it was attracted by the power of the ultimate and disappeared into Huaisher's right hand. Gradually, the dazzling lightning dissipated. Kuan Peng's wail song echoed in the darkness, lingering and gradually becoming clear, penetrating the obstruction of the ultimate and resounding in the deepest part of the earth. But even the earth could not block such a distant song. It resonated with the sky. Thick water vapor appeared out of thin air, surrounding Huaisher, instantly turning into a thick fog that could not be seen. In the thick fog, the sound of surging waves echoed. In the end, the sound of metal rang out from the sound of the tide and the whale song. It tore apart all the insignificant, lingering sounds. A thin line, but it lingered between the sky and the earth, echoing the distant blue sea. With this as the foundation, invisible waves spread in all directions. The mountains cannot stop it. Wherever it passed, in the river, in the lake, in the counter and refrigerator of the convenience store, in the seawater filtration field, on the turbulent surface of the sea, in all the places where there was liquid. Whether it was the teacup, the kettle, or the surface of the water, it formed waves of ripples that spread outwards. It was as if all the water in the world came from the same source. He could feel the boundless authority of this person. So, the wind was calm. There were no clouds for thousands of miles. Now, in the thick fog, Huaisher raised his head and looked around. But his line of sight seemed to extend along with the fog, forming a 360-degree field of vision. It extended outwards through countless gaps, and, along the ventilation ducts, it instantly covered the entire research center. He saw dozens of huge production lines operating in an orderly manner, hundreds of sleep-deprived free laborers wandering between their posts resentfully, and at the same time, he saw the supervisor in the office who locked the door and quietly dozed off. Huaisher frowned slightly. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Across a long distance, a clear voice instantly sounded in the supervisor's ear, accompanied by a gloomy voice. Sleep on the job. Deduct your pay. I didn't. The supervisor woke up instantly, got up from the table, and looked around in a panic but saw nothing. He only felt that he had an extremely realistic nightmare, and cold sweat dripped down. It was as if he saw a pair of cold and ruthless eyes peeping behind him. He did not dare to be lazy anymore. Huaisher nodded in satisfaction and withdrew his line of sight. When the surging fog quickly dissipated with Huaisher's will, this exaggerated perception did not dissipate with it. It seemed that as long as he wanted, as long as there was water vapor, he could extend his line of sight. If he condensed it into a line and pursued the limit of perception, following the underground river, his line of sight could even pass through the Dan wave in the middle and cast it into the ocean. Very good. This way, it would be much easier to control performance in the future. Let's see who still dares to slack off at work. However, this was just an additional function. When he lowered his head, he saw the weapon tightly clenched between his 5 fingers. The origin equipment forged with regret, the relic of Xiangjuan that had been reborn. There were no discordant flaws. The sacred mark and the material were integrated into one, completely Tianqing. It still vaguely maintained the outline from not long ago, but the material was completely different. It no longer had the color of steel, as if it was condensed from the clearest flowing water. A touch of blue flowed inside, like a vast ocean, sometimes calm, sometimes with monstrous waves. Just by waving it in his hand slightly, a storm swept forward, and the mighty sound of the tide burst forth, echoing endlessly in the sealed underground space. When Huaisher casually propped it up on the ground, he heard the earth wail. The alloy steel plate, which was enough to withstand the impact of artillery fire at close range, instantly bent and broke, and a large hole appeared. It almost overturned him along with it. Huaisher's expression suddenly changed, and he hurriedly picked up this thing. Although it was light in his hand, he felt that if he did not restrain it, the weight of this thing was enough to chisel a deep crack in the ground, straight down. If he left it alone, it would not be a problem even if it penetrated the Earth's crust. At the same time, an incomparably familiar aura came from above. He raised his head to look at the old man in front of him. Unbelievable. It seems that it's done. The old man nodded with relief. In this case, when a young master goes out in the future, I will more or less accompany him. Huaisher was silent and speechless. He could only reach out and give him a strong hug. Thank you, Feng Shu. It's nothing. It's great that it can be useful. Feng Shu smiled and accepted Huaisher's hug calmly. Finally, he looked at the iron mace in Huaisher's hand and asked curiously, "Does it have a name?" "Let me think." Huaisher looked at the reborn iron mace in his hand and fell into deep thought. But inexplicably, an ancient saying appeared in his mind. Stick to simplicity, whip the world, and shake the 4 seas. His eyes lit up, and he smiled. Since it's the foundation of heaven's fault that can stir the 4 seas, let's call it Feng. Feng Shu was stunned. In Huaisher's hand, the silent iron mace trembled slightly, and the sound of the tide reverberated. It was as if it was overjoyed. Huaisher had not expected to be able to reforge it so smoothly. Thanks to Feng Shu's help, it was even easier than he had originally imagined. Now, he had obtained a new weapon, Origin Substance Equipment +1. This was worth celebrating. Then, the most important thing now was to find a place to test out its power and effects. However, he had never found a tool that was easy to use and didn't feel bad about beating it up. Feng Shu, I'll have to trouble you to add 1 more person for dinner. Huaisher said, there's no need to prepare too much. That guy's appetite probably won't be very good when the time comes. As he spoke, he pulled out his phone. He smoothly found Raymond's number. Happily, he typed a message. You there? Food come. Chapter 999. Sunshine, beaches, cacti, and the beheading king of Jinling. When the Hawaiian tourist, Raymond, arrived, he was wearing flowery pants and a flowery shirt. revealing the long hair on his legs. He even wore sunglasses. This was the scene that he saw. Looking at Huaishur and the long sword in his hand, Raymond trembled with anger. His hands and feet were cold, and tears were about to fall. What's wrong with this world? What can we truck drivers do that will satisfy you? Bullying a poor, cursed person like me. Where's your humanity? Where's your conscience? What happened to the promised feast, the promised warm hospitality, and the promised feeling at home? A sumptuous meal was his last meal. Warm hospitality was a violent beating. Was this the way to return to his **King way? It was rare for him to come to the present realm for a vacation, and it was rare for someone to treat him. The two joys overlapped. What should it be again? He forgot the latter part. Where's the food? He asked angrily. Where's my food? It's only 5 o'clock. Why are you so anxious? Huaishur looked down at the time and patted the ring behind him. Come on up and move on your own. After the fight, I'll feed you. You can eat as much as you want. Redmond smacked his lips. He felt that there was something wrong with that statement. But the delicious food in front of him was like a carrot in front of a mule. It instantly attracted his attention. The big guy couldn't wait to take off his big flowery shirt and pants. Wearing only the closed combat t-shirt and shorts, he waved at Huaishur. What are you waiting for? He urged. Hurry up, hurry up. I'm already hungry and thirsty. Huaishur looked at him for a moment and slowly shook his head. You're not enough by yourself, he said. This time, I suggest you bring your dragon. Raymond's face twitched. Are you looking down on me? Or do you want to play a big game? This isn't a game, Huaishur. Although Raymond's own combat power was not inferior to anyone of the same level, the Eternal Road was full of pay-to-win players. The standard was that the more pay-to-win, the stronger they were. Even 2D characters knew that having a horse and not having one were two completely different things, let alone a knight. From the very beginning, this path was created as a tool of destruction for war. He spared no effort in piling up firepower to achieve the greatest destructive power. Even if Raymond was pretending to be a salted fish with a loan of several hundred years, as long as the truck was in hand and the logistics were sufficient, it would not be a problem to kill Donbua with one shot from dozens of kilometers away. He couldn't understand what Huaishur was trying to do. That kind of sparring was completely meaningless. Forget it. Anyway, there's an empty classroom. You'll know once you experience it. Huaishur reached out and activated the panel of the framework. After inputting the adjustment parameters, the arena was suddenly enveloped by a white light and the virtual classroom was covered. Then, just as Raymond chose his full body armor and held his axe in both hands, he warmed up his body and was about to charge forward for a round of pig lunges. However, he saw Huaishur raise his hand. Inside the heavy iron mace that seemed to be made of glass, blue light rose and dimmed, as if a calm sea was covered by dark clouds. Streaks of lightning were flashing inside. A storm was coming. Tens of meters away, Huaishur swung down, Fong, and a loud roar erupted along with his movement. It was as if thousands of lightning bolts had exploded at the same time. The storm that was wreaking havoc between heaven and earth suddenly descended. The terrifying waves converged into one and, following Fong's guidance, shot forward. It was as though Dora, the legendary giant heavy cannon that needed to be transported by railway, was aiming at him. Raymond froze in place as he was enveloped by the black muzzle of the cannon. His hair stood on end. The white storm carried a terrifying torrent and swallowed him up in an instant. He only had time to see the ground crack and collapse. Countless dust and sand flew into the sky. Then, Raymond's vision turned black. He entered a third-person perspective. He saw a huge fissure, tens of meters deep, appear out of thin air. Like a scar on the earth, it spread out to both sides and extended straight. In an instant, it extended to the end of this fictional world. His body had been evenly turned into pink paint and was smeared on every part of the fissure. Not even his bones remained. Just a blow from afar had blown him up. What the hell is this? The reborn Raymond raised his head in a daze. He could not believe it. You made Dongxia's sea-stabilizing divine needle lose its hair? F***ck, This is a little too big for you. Did you see Fu Sangwang when you came? Huaisha sighed. If you didn't see it, it means it's not him. Don't do all this nonsense. Hurry up. Where's the dragon's whisper? I don't believe it. Again, boom. Raymond was gone again. This time, Huaisha considerately controlled the distance of the storm. In an instant, only half of his body was blown up, leaving his head in the air to let him enjoy his free fall. Okay. I believe it. Wait a minute. When Raymond saw Huaisha lift Fang again, he jumped 3 meters high in fright. He jumped down from the arena and rummaged for his car keys. With a beep, the truck parked on the road directly crashed into the fence. The huge body of the truck drifted and stopped on the beach, close to the arena. Then, the high beam lights came on. The 2 light bulbs were like the eyes of a giant dragon, glancing at its driver. F*CK, I was still in the middle of a match. When I turned around, I realized that I lost everyone. Can you do it? I gave you a chance, but you didn't use it. Didn't you eat? Put in more effort to beat him up. Such a familiar greeting made the corners of Huaisha's eyes twitch. The Red Dragon seemed to have a good relationship with Beelzebub. As soon as they arrived at Doomsday, the Red Dragon turned on the radio. The 2 sides started to greet each other skillfully. You can't do it without me. Forget it. Stinky brother Beelzebub, step back. When I'm done, you'll suffer. Don't run. Beelzebub sneered. Don't be a coward, dog. Dog, bark again. Okay. Hurry up. Raymond covered his face and directly reached out. He grabbed the rearview mirror on the door and pulled. The huge truck instantly roared. Countless parts rolled over and covered Raymond's body. In an instant, the front of the truck had disappeared. Only the back of the truck was left, filled with weapons. In the arena, Raymond had already turned into a 5-meter-tall steel giant. Car of Fate, war form. He did not choose the most destructive mode of attacking. Instead, he sacrificed a part of his destructive power in exchange for a single soldier form with sufficient flexibility and moderate defense. With a wave of his hand, a huge shield flew out of the truck and landed in his hand. Then, the heavy halberd was placed on the tower shield that was like a city wall. The heavy spearhead of the halberd was burned red and covered in a layer of magnificent light. Come on. The high-pitched sound of metal rubbing against each other intertwined and became Raymond's deep voice. Huaisha smiled and raised his hand. Fang slashed down. A hurricane swept forward. Within the armor, Raymond subconsciously stared with wide eyes. The giant shrank behind the tower shield. However, after waiting for a long time, all he felt was a gust of wind. The energy meter fluctuated for a moment before returning to normal. There was no alarm at all. However, when he raised his eyes to look ahead, Huaisha's figure was no longer there. The alarm had come from the side. With a sliding step, Huaisha appeared at the side of the tower shield, and Fang slashed through the air. Raymond abruptly turned around. This time, however, it was just a hurricane. Huaisha, on the other hand, stepped on the giant's kneeling knees and leapt up. Fang aimed at the giant head of the armor and smashed down. Another roar erupted and countless steel fragments flew. Victory and defeat had been decided. What happened? Are you blind? The Red Dragon was furious. You've been tricked. At this moment, Redmond finally realized what was going on. Damn it, you tricked me. The moment he restarted, he angrily questioned, how can you be like this? Only now did he realize that Huaisha had been playing with him from the very beginning. It was true that Fang's destructive power was frightening, but after seeing Huaisha's feints twice, Su Chen finally realized something that he had overlooked. Not only was Fang's destructive power ridiculous, but his consumption of origin substance was also at an even higher rate. The analyzer indicated that Fang was Xiangjuan's stigmata relic. Tianwen's faction had 2 branches. Great Siming's faction was most famous for its large numbers and its overwhelming numbers. As for Yun Zhongjuan's faction, what was it most famous for? Mana, and more mana. Starting from the soul-specialized water ghost, the amount of mana they had was twice as much as others of the same tier, and there was still a lot of room for improvement. When Great Sea Ming leveled up, the amount of mana they had would triple. But when Yin Zhongjuan's faction leveled up, the amount of mana they had would triple. Otherwise, how could dead water transform into Xiangjuan and still become a colossus like the Kuan-Peng? How big would the ocean have to be to raise such a fish? But Huaishir was different. He had Xiangjuan's Stigmata relic. Even if he could perfectly use all his abilities, he did not have Xiangjuan's mana. Even if he had the Sea King's fish tank, he did not have the Sea King's water. He blew himself up with one blow, and the cracks extended for dozens of miles. Although the destructive power was exaggerated, this was an elevated area. Huaishir's trick just now was to burn all the mana in one blow. He might have even consumed a lot of souls and divinity, which directly blew him up. If it was not for the elevated classroom, even if he blew Raymond up, he would have been seriously injured. In the end, he relied on the mechanism of refreshing after the winner was decided. He had been pretending for a long time without being discovered. I tried to persuade you, but you didn't listen. Besides, I didn't hide it. Huaishir smiled innocently and blinked. Can we start again? Come on, you're a coward if you don't. The steel giant waved his hand, threw away the shield, and then pulled out a big axe. Today, I'll let you experience the power of Gundam. Sorry, I've driven Osiris. You rented it? How dare you say that? But I've driven Osiris. It's gone. No one cares how you brag. But I've driven Osiris twice. That's enough. Raymond completely broke through the defense. He was furious. The steel giant roared, and 6 flames spurted out from his back. He pushed forward, and the blazing halberd swept across. Bang! A loud bang burst out at the place where Ah Fong and the heavy halberd collided. Ah Fong was unscathed, but a crack appeared on the heavy halberd. What was even more shocking was that Raymond's output frequency did not decrease. This halberd should have split a building, but Huaishir did not even take a step back. What the hell is this? The truck driver was shocked for a whole year. How'd you do it? It's a Jian. Haven't you seen it before? It's a heavy weapon from Dongxia. Well, it's similar to the war hammer and mace in Europe. It's specially used to break armor. Huaishir calmly explained, as an armor-breaking weapon, it's reasonable that it has a certain amount of weight and impact. Come, don't mind it. Let's continue the game. Hurry up, he said. Dinner will be cold if we continue. Chapter 1000. Because it was an armor-piercing weapon, it was reasonable to use it against the mech? Reasonable my ass. Raymond sneered. The scanner had already seen the ripples spreading out from the ground beneath Huaishir's feet. How could it fall for his trick? Try blocking it again. The halberd shot out flames as it roared forward. At the same time, the heavy axe slashed down to block off Huaishir's path of retreat. 2 shrill sounds of collision rang out in an instant. The ground beneath Huaishir's feet cracked, and the ground was lowered by several meters. At the same time, however, the halberd and the heavy axe were swept away. The price was that the clothes on his upper body were all torn apart, and the skin on his arms was covered with cracks. The power of the recoil. However, the key point was he had actually managed to block it. When did this fellow's explosive power become so fierce? He was actually able to rely on the strength of his 2 arms to block the chariot of fate? Or could it be that this was something that was trying to fool him? Raymond suddenly had an ominous premonition. It was a shadow and nightmare that existed within the hearts of every mech pilot. Could it be that someone is going to tear apart his mech today? A high-pitched screech suddenly rang out. Radar alert. The smooth curve on the reading device suddenly expanded, like a towering mountain rising from the ground. On the display screen, the heavy axe in Huaishir's hand rapidly enlarged, and a miniature scope revealed the violent power brewing within it. Huaishir's upper body was bare as he stepped forward on the cracked ground. A fong in his hand casually swung left and right as though he was stretching his muscles and bones. However, the deafening sound of waves followed his movements and spread out in all directions. Invisible waves surged, distorting the air and finally transforming into a massive storm. When the storm was retracted, it wrapped around Ah Fong's axe. The pitch-black storm flashed with lightning. You stepped forward. Smash! Raymond instinctively dropped his axe and raised his shield once more. Immediately after that, however, he felt a strange sense of weightlessness. It was as though the 5-meter-tall armor, weighing hundreds of tons, was unable to withstand the terrifying impact of the whip and was momentarily lifted off the ground before falling to the ground. 2 meters. A loud boom rang out. As for the tower shield that he raised again, it was torn apart by Ah Fong as if it was a piece of paper. The terrifying impact was transmitted from the shield to the arm, causing the armor to distort and the steel armor break, causing sparks to fly. The low tremors continued to reverberate through the armor of the Chariot of Destiny, even reaching the deepest parts of the chariot, causing his vision to darken. He finally understood why that bastard Huaishir had come looking for him and why he had asked him to wear the armor. In the end, he was just a target for this bastard to test the armor-piercing effect of his new weapon. Unlike the pure destructive power of the Hammer of Pain, Ah Fong's heavy blow was penetrating and vibrating, just like how the knights on war horses in the era of cold weapons were unable to block the impact of the flail. Even through steel, the fragile internal organs would rupture and bleed under the shock. Huaishir had relied purely on his physical strength to unleash such a jaw-dropping attack. The price he had to pay was that his arm was broken and twisted. Recoil. He frowned and straightened his limp right arm. With a flick of his wrist, it returned to its original state. Even though it would take another 4 or 5 minutes for the bones to recover, it wouldn't affect him at all. He directly switched Ah Fong to his left hand. Before he reached the 4th-tier origin substance transformation stage, he could just switch hands. Not a big deal. No, there's something wrong with this thing of yours. Raymond keenly sensed that something was wrong. Even you were injured. The impact just now wasn't your own strength. That's right. To be exact, it's its power. Huaishir smiled slightly as he raised the long truncheon in his hand again. Be careful. The trust of an elder is very heavy. This was the foundation of the Heavenly Palace. After stripping the spirit coffin from the stone essence hall and recasting it, it had become the foundation of the Heavenly Palace. Even if this incomplete Heavenly Palace couldn't be unfolded for the time being, its weight was equivalent to that of the stone essence hall, including the front courtyard, the backyard, the left and right side pavilions, the main building in the center, and even the storage room at the back, the garden. All the furniture, displays, decorations, even the depth of the foundation, the soil, and rocks below. Only Huaishir, who had received Feng Shu's approval and complete trust, could ignore this exaggerated weight and use it as he wished. If he didn't hold back at all, then every strike of the truncheon could be seen as equivalent to the impact of the entire stone essence hall. Just now, Huaishir had only released a third of it. If he didn't have the support of the symphony of mastery to divert and guide the force, Huaishir would probably only need to wave it casually to completely blow it up. This was a genuine heavy armor-piercing weapon. Apart from Eastern Xia's Quafu and Rome's Astra, who possessed extraordinary strength, Uncle Fong was probably the only person in the world who could truly use this thing freely. However, as a young person, he still had to rely on his family's elders to wear it and go into battle. His brain was probably a little damaged. Come, let's start again. After Huaishir finished panting, he raised Ah Fong with his left hand again. The second half begins. Naive. Raymond laughed proudly. Since when did you have the illusion that I, a truck driver, want to fight you in close combat? Now that I've figured out the ability of your weapon, the rest is nothing to be afraid of. Thunderous booms rang out one after another. The heavy armor on Redmond's body began to fall off rapidly. His entire mech seemed to have shrunk by an entire size in an instant. Even his melee weapons were tossed aside as he flew into the air. The launcher hidden under the armor reversed and came out. In an instant, the radar locked on and all missiles were fired. Hundreds of blazing lights turned into a torrential rain and soared into the air, outlining dazzling trajectories in the air. They intertwined with each other, forming unpredictable silhouettes and attack paths. Not only were there conventional rockets, there were also origin shock bombs, annihilation curse bombs, and even countless phantoms to confuse the opponent's camouflage and activate flying blades, as well as lasers and rapid-fire autocannons, including dozens of long-range attacks. This was a flawless 360-degree circus from a first-person perspective. The firepower that erupted without restraint in the blink of an eye was enough to shroud most of the city in flames. It was terrifying. However, did you just say some extra lines to insert flag? Fleischer scratched his head and sighed. He stood in place and let the destructive flames fall from the sky. Then, the sound of the tide burst forth again. The crimson ocean surged out from his hands and spread out. The whale song of the Kuanpung played in the deep sea, and the sea of regret reappeared. Did Raymond forget? He hadn't used the ability of Xiangjuan's stigmata until now. Layers of the ocean turned into barriers, shrouding Huaishi's surroundings. In the blood-red ocean, there were many strange shadows. Countless huge and ferocious silhouettes swam in it, showing the true essence of hell. As for Huaishi, she only felt that the sea was really quite big. It would be a pity if he didn't raise something, but he didn't have any fish. Now, the sea of regret without the fish rose from the ground and rolled in the air, spreading out in all directions. Countless vortexes and undercurrents were operating within it, swallowing all the destructive light, wrapping it up, and then twisting it into pieces. Whip the world are the four seas. It was for a Fang. Although it was limited by its ability and couldn't encompass the world, all the sea was still possible. This was the ability it inherited as a stigmata relic. In addition to Xiangjuan's amazing control of the liquid, Huaishi could freely mobilize this sea of regret without using any source substance, turning it into an extension of his hands and feet. As for the upper limit, it was still as heavy as the stone marrow hall. Now, when Huaishi waved his hand, layers of seawater gathered, compressed to the limit, and shot toward Raymond in the distant sky. Water. Just now, he should have completely destroyed Raymond's cockpit. Why was it an illusion? Or was it, are you stupid? A mecha also knows martial arts. Even gods can't stop it. Raymond whistled. You think you're the only one who knows martial arts? It can't be, right? It can't be, right? No one would think that you're the only one in the world who knows how to cheat, right? In Huaishi's third-person perspective, the broken heavy armor was rapidly regenerating, as if it was being repaired and repaired by an invisible maintenance team at 1,000,000 times faster speed. In an instant, it looked brand new. In the cockpit, Raymond lit a cigarette, took a deep breath, and exhaled. He smiled crookedly. Beast Spirit Manifestation. Lifeblood Qualitative Change. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.